right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. Welcome to day 2 and the afternoon session of the Women Blaze Trails Festival. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for the weekend. Yesterday was the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, and to celebrate, last year we launched a 3-day virtual festival featuring women in science, exploration, conservation, adventure, engineering, photography, filmmaking, and more from across the planet. So the goal of this festival is simple. We want to celebrate incredible women doing incredible things around the world, day in and day out. So all weekend long, we'll be meeting women on the front lines of their fields, showcasing their stories, work, challenges, adventures, research, and expeditions. So this festival is organized by Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Our goal is to inspire the next generation of scientists and explorers. We do this by bringing those on the front lines of science, exploration, and conservation live into classrooms across North America and beyond through virtual guest speakers and field trips. Since 2015, we've hosted well over 3,000 live events, connecting 500,000 students with scientists and explorers in 95 countries. And the cornerstone of what we do is that it is and always will be free for classrooms everywhere. So if you haven't visited, check out our website, exploringbytheseat.com. This is one of our favorite months because in February, we kick all the men out and we host women in science, exploration, conservation from all over the world. We've got probably about 45 live events there for classrooms to take advantage of. And if you visit our YouTube channel, you can find thousands of previous events you can tune into with your students, with your kids at home, or just for your own general interest. All right, well, our last event took us into the ocean, and this event is going to keep us there. So we're going to get to meet Martina Capriati. She is an Italian marine biologist and scuba diver. She was born and grew up along the Adriatic Sea coast, where she developed a passion for the sea. During her first research year, she focused on chemical pollution and its effect on marine organisms. Thanks to a grant from the National Geographic Society, she investigated microplastics and chemical pollution in the Adriatic Sea. She was awarded as one of the 3 Sky Ocean Rescue Scholars in Europe for this project. She's currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Connecticut, where she's directing her interests now to investigating how marine filter feeders interact with the ecosystem. Let's bring Martina in live with us right now. Hey, Martina, great to see you.
Hi, Joe. I'm so happy to be here today and celebrate with you this wonderful day.
All right, amazing. Well, we're thrilled to have you joining us live.
Yeah.
I'm going to disappear for a little while. We want to get to know you. We want to hear your story, and then we'll do a little Q&A action together.
Absolutely. See you later. There you go. You should see my screen, right?
We got it. Looks good.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Joe, and all the audience. And thanks, Joe, for the presentation. So I don't need to add anything more. But I want to start with my story. So what exactly bring me over here? So I'm currently, I'm Italian, but I'm currently presenting from USA. Indeed, I'm a postdoc researcher at University of Connecticut. And but actually my story started in Italy, in a little town called San Benedetto del Tronto along the Adriatic Sea. It's a really, really nice town, and I suggest you to visit if you happen to travel to Italy. And so I met the sea since after a few days after I was born, and I swim since I was really, really young, and so I always had a special passion for the sea. And when I was a teenager, I became a lifeguard. I started to scuba dive, and it was during those first dives that I was literally mesmerized by the beauty of that underwater world, basically. And so this was probably the spark that made me, that pushed me to study marine biology in the future. But when you go underwater, it's also really common to find the human footprint. So a lot of debris, a lot of pollution. And so this was another aspect of my teenager experience that pushed me to study marine pollution. Specifically during my first years as marine biologist, I focus on chemical pollution. So it means all these chemical compounds that are toxic for life, but that are highly present in marine waters. Many of them that are the most preoccupied are the persistent organic pollutants that are called persistent because they are able to persist for a really, really long time in the marine environment, and they can also accumulate inside the tissues of animals, not only in the marine environment, but also in other kind of scenarios. Going on with my studies, when I arrived to my master degree, and so my master thesis, I decided to continue to study chemical pollution because I was really, really passionate about that. I wanted to understand specifically the effects of these kind of threats. And so I moved to Norway, at University of Science and Technology of Trondheim in Norway. And over there, I specifically studied a group of these chemicals called endocrine disruptors. I know it's a really, really bad word, but basically those group of compounds are able to disrupt, so disturb the endocrine system, so the hormone system. And this because if we are gonna look a little bit into the chemical structure of these compounds, you can see here on the left, the estradiol is a natural hormone that we produce as humans, and also many marine animals produce. The nonylphenol, for example, is a really toxic compound that has a really similar structure to the estradiol. So when these kind of chemicals enter the body, they are able to mimic the action of the hormones. And so they are able to disrupt and disturb all the hormonal system. And I was super interested in understanding the mechanism of action of these compounds. And I was in Norway, so of course I couldn't choose a better experimental model as the Atlantic salmon. And so this experience in Norway actually let me jump into the real researcher life, because it was an experimental project. And so I really, really loved. At that point, it was a bit clearer in my mind what my career should have been. And so that's why I decided to continue with the research, and I applied for a PhD course in Italy at University of Camerino. And during my doctoral studies, I was able to continue to study the endocrine disruptors. So these chemicals that are toxic and able to disrupt the hormonal system. But I was also able to do many, many other activities over there, because the department where I was working had sea turtle first aid facilities. So I was also involved in these other super interesting aspects, so saving sea turtles, maybe during the winter when the cold weather and the rush sea basically let them strand along the beach, or sometimes they get caught by catch by the fishermen. So we save this turtle, and during the summer, so the warmer temperature of the sea, we used to release them to free them in their natural environment. After my doctoral studies, I really wanted to continue in the research. I know in Italy it's not so easy to enter in the research career, but I really wanted to try And so I started to write project, and I also wanted to, like I said, continue to study the chemical pollution and its effect on marine life. At that time, there was also another emerging aspect that was threatening the marine environment, and I'm talking about the microplastics. So microplastics are basically really tiny plastic particles that are smaller than 5 millimeters. So this means that the majority of microplastics are actually invisible to human eyes. Only the largest particle, like between 1 and 5 millimeter, are actually visible. And this kind of pollution is threatening our ocean because the concentration of these tiny pieces, fragments, are increasing every years more. And I used to study these mechanisms in the Mediterranean Sea, and I mean, we can find microplastic all over the planet, actually, all in every ocean. But the Mediterranean Sea is particularly vulnerable because it's a really enclosed sea with a low exchange of the water with the Atlantic Ocean. So there is it is particularly threatened by the accumulation of microplastics in the waters. So my intention in this project was to understand which was the role of microplastics as a carrier of chemical contaminants. Indeed, microplastics are able to attract on their surface all these toxic compounds that I was telling you before, also the endocrine disruptors. So basically these microplastics, when they travel along the sea and they are also able to be ingested by many animals, bring all this chemical inside the body. And so my aim was to understand better which was this mechanism and why and how this situation was threatening the marine life. So I did my research along the Adriatic Sea, exactly in the place where I was born and I grew up. You can see here the manta trawl, so an instrument that I used on the sea for collecting microplastics from the surface seawater. So this project was actually supported by the National Geographic Society, and I was so glad and so lucky to become a National Geographic explorer and to enter the international community of the explorers. And so this allowed me to make a lot of friends, to know a lot of colleagues, to make literally network. It was, it is actually. I'm still an explorer and I'm still collaborating with many explorers all around the planet. And for the same project, I was actually also awarded a Sky Ocean Rescue Scholar. Indeed, Sky, that is a really well-known media company in Europe, opened an ocean rescue a Sky Ocean Rescue campaign for protecting the ocean from plastic pollution and chemical pollution and pollution in general. So they choose me and other two girls, Imogen Napper and Annette Fayet, for as the three scholars of this campaign. So continuing my career and my life, when this National Geographic research project actually ended, I was actually looking for a real job. I wanted to do an experience abroad, but also try to change a little bit my research focus, because in your career it's always good see other kind of approaches, see how other groups are facing studying certain problems. So I applied for a position in USA and I got the job. So I'm currently still here as a postdoc researcher, specifically at the University of Connecticut. But this project I'm currently involved in is an international collaboration with an Israeli group. Indeed, before actually moving to US, I was in Israel. I went to dive in the Mediterranean side and in the Red Sea side of the Israeli coast to study suspension feeders and, most importantly, to learn how to sample the water flow of these animals. It is a really, really cool technique. I'm going to show you later what is about. And basically what I've learned in Israel, I then applied in USA in suspension feeders that are characteristic of the North Atlantic Ocean. But what are suspension feeders? Suspension feeders are aquatic animals that are able to feed filtering seawater. Many of them are also called filter feeders. So basically, they, for example, on the top right, you can see a mussel, a blue mussel. If you see these two red arrows, they basically inhale the water inside their body through this aperture over here. They filter the water with all the plankton and all the plankton that are present in the marine water, and they exhale, so expel the cleared water outside through this other siphon. And so this is the mechanism of feeding. So my aim in this project was to study this mechanism. On the top, you can see two mussels I am working on, the blue mussel and the red mussel. The red mussel specifically is from a salt marsh. So if you recall the picture of me over here while I was sampling during the winter, this is a salt marsh that is characteristic of the New England coast. And so this mussel, the red mussel, is specifically inhabiting the community in these salt marshes. But I also study another group of marine invertebrates called sea squirts, and specifically the vast tunicate and the club tunicate. They are also really curious, and I'm happy to show you today because almost nobody, apart from the scientists, know of the existence of these animals. So today I hope that I shared a bit more about the invertebrate biodiversity. And so also in this case, the sea squirts are able to, even if they are different from mussels, they are able to inhale the water inside their body, filter of the particles, and exhale the water outside. So my aim in this case was to detect what they were like inhaling and what they are exhaling, because I was really curious to see what they are actually ingesting, what they are eating, basically. And I learned this really cool technique. I basically put these little two tiny tubes in front of the aperture and the siphons of the mussels and of the ascidians, and I collected the water that they were using for filtering in this special vial, and all these happen underwater. So it was pretty tricky, of course, for this also for this reason. And I'm currently working on this project. So, and it is, really curious and also really important from an ecological point of view, because this filtration that they are doing can also affect the biodiversity and the concentration of the little particle of the plankton. So these animals, even if they live attached to a surface for the entire life, and so even if they don't swim around, they are able to affect the marine environment. So, like I said, I'm currently working on this project, but I'm about to end, and my aim is to try to find point for connecting this approach that, as you can see, is completely different from the approach that I was studying back in Italy with the marine pollution. So yeah, I hope that my career will allow me to find a meeting point between two really different fields of the marine biologist. I don't want to go over and don't steal more time for any questions. So yeah, Joe, are you there?
All right. Hey, Martina.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that great presentation today. One thing that I noticed from your presentation is that science really is kind of a ticket to kind of see the world in a lot of cases, to meet new people, explore exciting places. And it seems like science has really done that for you.
Absolutely. I love this job, not just because I'm passionate about the marine environment, but also because it's really, really dynamic. As you can see, I was able to travel. I was able to work underwater, but also marine science work underwater, but also work in the lab, also work many hours in the computer to analyze the data and writing papers. So it's a really, really dynamic job, and you will never get bored about this job. And also because, when you have a project that you are working on in 2 or 3 years, after that the project ends, so you have to start another project. So it's even dynamic in the long term, not just in the short term.
Awesome. All right, well, let's start grabbing some questions here. So first of all, what brought you to ocean science? What hooked you and brought you into the ocean?
Yeah, so like I said, I always had a special passion for the sea, for the aquatic environment, but I actually decided to enter in this field when I was a teenager. Like I said, when I started to scuba dive, guys, I have to tell you, when you go underwater, you literally are fascinated by what's over there, seeing all the life that is swimming, that is living, the interaction between animals. So I was literally trapped by this the beauty of the life. So this was the spark, like I said, that helped me to figure out what was my path, my future path.
Yeah, I think that's how I try to describe the underwater world to people. Is you can go for a walk in a forest and you see some things like birds and insects and mammals, but sometimes it's fleeting. They disappear really quickly. It's spread out. You're lucky if you get to see a few things, but when you're underwater, you are surrounded by an incredible amount of life. It is so different than being on land. So I really encourage people, like Sylvia Earle said last night, to just put a mask on and stick your face in the water.
Yes.
And just see what you see.
Yeah, agreed. Indeed, is also heartbreaking to see, for example, marine debris. Debris that are maybe it's a bottle or it's a plastic cup. That come from human actions, and they end up to the ocean, and they are literally threatening marine life. So yeah, when you go underwater and see these scenarios in front of your eyes, you say, oh my God, what are we doing to our planet?
Absolutely. So filter feeders is what the group you're looking at now. And I think, a lot of people maybe overlook filter feeders, or some people just see them in the sense that, like mussels or clams on your plate. So why should we be paying a little more attention to the filter feeders?
Absolutely. And they are really, really curious animals. So I actually used to study mussels in the past when I studied chemical pollution, because mussels, for example, are excellent bioindicator of the health of the ocean, because they are able to accumulate inside their body, inside the tissue, all these chemical compounds, the toxic compound I was telling you about. And so with this project, like I said, I was able to study mussels from another point of view, and they are really, really curious. Like I said, I show you only some picture. We don't have a huge amount of hours, but they feed and sometimes they are like really open. So you can see the inhaler aperture that they use to inhale water that is really open. You are even able to see the gills sometimes when you look at them. And so it's incredible. We sometimes, like you said, Joe, sometimes we think about mussels just in a plate with pasta, but actually they are really, really curious animal. And when you think that mussels, like by selecting and capturing and choosing what they want to ingest, so what they want to eat, they are affecting the biodiversity of the plankton. So plankton, they basically feed on invisible cells, invisible particles that are in the ocean, the plankton. So in the plankton, we can find bacteria, we can find microalgae, protozoans, or the larvae of some other kind of organisms. But like I said, they are invisible to human eye. So they are able to detect these really, really tiny particles and see, okay, I like these cells, so I want to ingest it. Okay, I don't like these cells, so I wanna get rid of it. And so this, I think, is a really curious mechanism, because sometimes when we think to filter feeders, we think about like just a sieve. So whatever passed through the sieve is detected. Whatever is smaller than the mesh is like pushed away. But actually, in suspension feeders, is not. They are able to like even detect, even if they are like particles, cells that are really, really small, like bacteria, and these bacteria that are able to escape the mesh size of the filter, actually they are retained, because probably the mussel or the ascidians, the tunicates want to eat it, because maybe they like for certain reason. Indeed, for this reason, they are called biological filters, not just filters, for this reason. So my mechanism here, my study here, is to understand the mechanism behind this process. Joe, I can't.
There we go.
Okay.
To squeeze in one more question, if you can sum it up for us in about a minute, which might be hard, but the filter feeders, they are filtering the water. The microplastics are potentially being ingested, toxins in the water. Are we seeing any evidence that that's having an impact on us when we consume?
That's a super, super interesting question. So there are many evidence that suspension feeders ingest microplastics and microfibers from the ocean. But the interesting thing is that these animals are able to expel the microplastics.
Okay.
So there is a really tiny amount of microplastics that are actually retained inside the animals. So and there's an important message to send, because sometimes we think about mussels are like accumulator of these particles, but actually they are a great accumulator of chemicals that are, like, from a size point of view, really, really tiny. They are molecules basically, and this because chemicals are able to accumulate inside the tissue. But microplastics are, like, even if they are still invisible, are still larger than a chemical compound. And so it has been demonstrated also from my colleague here at University of Connecticut that these particles are like ingested but also egested through the feces.
Okay. Very cool. Well, Martina, I want to share a banner here. Let's get that up there. If people would like to follow along, learn more about yourself and the work you're doing, they can find you on Twitter. They can find you on Instagram. So great places to follow along. Martina, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your passion for the ocean and filter feeders in particular right now. And it sounds like the work there's still lots to do. So we look forward to catching up and finding out how things are going down the line.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, Martina. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right. Well, I'm looking backstage and I see our next guest just hanging around. And so I don't want to leave her doing that for too long. So I'm going to jump in with a quick introduction. We're heading to Costa Rica. We're back out in the field. We're catching up with Osa Conservation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the globally significant biodiversity of the Osa Peninsula. This remote corner of Costa Rica harbors 2.5% of the biodiversity on the entire planet in an area 0.1% of our planet's total surface area. Absolutely incredible. We have two speakers, I think, who are going to be joining us today. The first is Carolina. She's an Argentinian wildlife biologist who specializes in community ecology. In 2021, she started working with Osa Conservation as the wildlife monitoring coordinator. She is leading the Arboreal Connectivity Project, which includes the installation of wildlife bridges, camera traps, monitoring, and furthering citizen science projects. And then also we have Eleanor Flatt joining us today. She is a wildlife biologist working in the rainforest of Costa Rica. She's a wildlife monitoring program coordinator at Osa Conservation. In 2018, she was named an Elodie Sanford Explorer by the Scientific Exploration Society. Let's bring in, I see Eleanor front and center. Hey, Eleanor, how are you?
Hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's good to see you again.
Why is it that I can never connect with you outside of a tree or maybe in the middle of the rainforest?
It's just always where you'll find us, up in the canopy. It's not a bad way to spend a Saturday.
No, I don't think so at all. Eleanor, I'm going to let you take over for a little bit, take you nice and full screen, and then we'll do a little bit of questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Joe. Hello, everyone. Good morning. As Joe mentioned, my name is Eleanor Flatt, and I'm the Wildlife Conservation and Technology Manager at Osa Conservation. And I've been living and working in the rainforest now for the past 6 years. So this is the place I call home. And this morning I am up in the canopy. Not a bad way to spend a Saturday morning. And I'm actually in the forest in the Osa Peninsula, which is southwest Costa Rica. And we're at the Osa Conservation Campus, which is a biological reserve just on the edge of Corcovado National Park, which is one of the national parks in the Osa Peninsula. So you can see this beautiful forest behind me this morning, and you can hear all the wonderful sounds of the cicadas. And actually, we're going to talk to you this morning about one of the threats that this forest faces, and that's roads. So I'm actually up in a tree on the side of a road, which you can see just down here. Had to swing across like a monkey. But these roads, they cause problems for forests such as disconnectivity. So they break up the forest, which means wildlife populations struggle to move through. And then they also mean that they could possibly cause roadkill. So when animals try and cross, the cars can hit them, and that's end game, unfortunately. And that threat is even more of a challenge for the species that live up in the treetops, so where I am now. Because obviously they can't just walk across the road. So if there's no connectivity in the canopy, they're stuck in this forest patch, which is not a good thing. And this is a challenge that is worldwide, so in all the different forest types you get across the globe. But there has been a proven tool to combat this conservation challenge, and that's the Arboreal Bridge. I'm just going to swing around a little bit more. There we go. And I'm joined with Dr. Carolina Pinto this morning. Hello. She's giving us a wave. So that tool is the Arboreal Bridge, which you can see in the background here. So these artificial structures can be installed in the canopy above roads, and this gives a pathway for wildlife to move from one forest patch to the other in a safe way, so they don't go head to head with any vehicles. And then this means that wildlife can travel across to get to other food resources, more habitat that has sleeping sites, particularly for monkeys. And then also that can keep populations interacting. So different individuals of the same species to allow for genetic diversity as well. So these arboreal bridges, more and more countries are using them to overcome the challenge of roads. Particularly, there's been a lot of studies in Australia, now South Africa, China, Japan. but there are not many studies, just a handful of a few studies in tropical forests in Latin America. But if we are to overcome this global challenge for conservation, we need as many bridges of different designs in many different locations for different species. So we can say these designs work best for these species in this area, and then wildlife can safely cross the road wherever they are in the world. So what we've been doing at Osa Conservation is we are trialing 5 different designs of arboreal bridges. So this is one design that we have here, which is like a double rope. Let me get a good shot of it. There we go. So it's 2 pieces of rope from one tree to the other. And this is one of the 5 designs that we will be trialing. The reason we're trialing different designs is to see which different species use those designs. So for the smaller species like the mouse, opossum, and the squirrels, are they using these bridges or other designs like the ladder that we have? And then which are the bigger species using? So we have sloths, anteaters, and monkeys here that we ideally want to be using these bridges. So how do we find out what wildlife are using these bridges? So we install camera traps, and Carolina's here now, and she's going to check the camera trap, and hopefully we found some more species.
Well, before checking the camera trap, I want to tell you a little bit about the results that we have found so far. These bridges have been installed for 1 year now, and we check them every 3 months to check what animals are using them. And so far, we have found 7 species, right?
8 species.
8, sorry. So 3 species of birds that use them for perching, and 5 mammals. We have white-faced monkeys, kinkajous, squirrel, woolly opossum, and mouse opossum. So we have a lot of wildlife that haven't been using these arboreal bridges so far. We're going to check this camera to see if we have any new species.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. So we only have one of the 4 species of monkey that we have in the region using the bridges so far. So it would be really nice if we could get another species today. So the remaining species of monkey that we have here are the squirrel monkey, the howler monkey, and the spider monkey. So Carolina's just taking the SD card out of the camera trap now, and we're going to have a little look to see if we've got any more activity. So this bridge was last checked in December. So this is the first check of 2020. So let's hope 2022 brings some good news. We're just having a look now.
We are looking. So as you can see, you see it?
More or less.
More or less. Well, sometimes we don't have any species, it's just nothing, because the camera activates with movement. So if the bridge moves because of wind or anything, we will have like videos with nothing. So this one, let's check the following one.
Okay, whilst Carolina has a look at those videos, I just want to talk a little bit more about one species in particular that we're really looking forward to seeing using these bridges, and that's the spider monkey. That's the largest species of primate we have here in the Osa, and it's an endangered species, but their ability to disperse a wide variety of seeds means it's not only important for that animal to cross the bridge, but also for the forest on the other side, because they're rainforest architects, so they can disperse a wide variety of seeds. So that's always one species that we're looking for. Do we have something?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, can you see? This is one of the primates we were missing. This is
So we've got a squirrel monkey.
An endemic species of this region, and also it's endangered. So it's super cool that they are using it.
I don't know if you guys can see the video, but the little monkey's walking on one part of the branch, and then it's using its tail kind of as like a pendulum for balance.
Eleanor, can you try to play the video again, maybe a little closer And a little less of an angle because we got a little glare of the sun. Like a little less of an angle.
How about that? That one.
Tilt it down, maybe just a little bit down. Yeah, okay, I see the monkey now. Yeah, with the tail. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. So it seems that animals are getting used to it and they're starting to use the bridge, so it's complete success for now. We know in some countries it takes like 5 years to animals to get used to it. So this is like super good.
So we've got 9 species in around a year using these bridges. So that's really good early stage success. But like Carolina said, it can take almost 5 years sometimes for wildlife to start using these bridges. So that's something else that we're testing here at Osa Conservation. How can we get wildlife using these bridges sooner?
So now we are really trying a vanilla experiment, we call it, but it's just vanilla essence that is going to hopefully attract wildlife, because as there are artificial structures, many animals don't think that it's a good way to go to the other side of the road. So what we want is animals to get attracted to it. So we are going to attach this bottle that has sanitary towels inside.
It smells delicious.
Smells delicious as vanilla. And we're going to attach this in one side of the bridge and another one like this one on the other side. And we're going to check more or less every 2 months to put again the vanilla essence and see if animals are being attracted or not. So hopefully with these attractants, more animals are going to try to use the bridge and hopefully learn how to use it too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Joe, I don't know if we have any questions.
All right. Excellent. Well, that's great. It's, I mean, first of all, it's awesome to see the two of you up in the tree with some really cool conservation. And, you know, you're always thinking of solutions like that vanilla essence to put it on either side to see if that can get the animals using those bridges a little quicker. So speaking of those bridges, you mentioned there was one monkey species that's been using them. What do you think might be keeping the other ones from doing it? Do you think it's just they haven't discovered it yet? Or do you think there's something that might make them nervous about the bridge structure? What do you think has kept the other species away so far?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. So we now have 2 species of monkey, including the one that we just found. And they're actually the 2 smaller species of the 4. So that could be part of it, that the smaller species, the bridges can obviously support a smaller weight better. So maybe these larger species take a little bit longer to get used to them, or we need to adapt our design. So we're always working on new designs or new support systems that we can add to the existing designs so more species use them. But recently, about a couple of weeks ago, the spider monkey, which is the biggest species, we found one individual playing with the bridges. They didn't cross, but they were just kind of bouncing around on them, seeing what's this. So maybe with time, now they know that they're there and they're touching them, they might attempt to cross.
And also, Joe, that's a question that we want to find a solution, to find it, like, what is the answer? So we're going to try different models too, to see if there is something about the model they don't like this design. We're going to try like maybe 3 ropes to have it more like security, or a ladder bridge, but with a mesh. So we're going to try different structures to see if they need like a more confident structure or what is the best design for these 2 species.
All right, very cool. Well, I know that vanilla would work for me. I love the smell of vanilla, so that would work for me. I'd check that out for sure.
Paulina got it out her bag. I was hit in the face with vanilla. It was lovely.
Yeah, very cool. Well, there's a question here coming in via the chat, and they're wondering, have you ever tried something to make them appear more natural, maybe more to look more like a branch? Is that something that you've tried before?
Yeah, there has been some studies that have used kind of natural materials for bridges. Something that we're perhaps going to start doing is attaching kind of natural vines, at least to where the bridge is connected to the tree. And then with time, it will just decompose and fall off. But at least to begin with, it will make the transition a little bit smoother and not be like, here's an artificial rope.
Yeah,
be careful.
The only problem with natural structures is because of the weather here. It's like like, it makes everything goes bad really fast. So if we put a natural, let's say, rope, it would take 3 months to like fall apart.
Yeah.
So
And
that's why, yeah, we have to overcome that issue.
And we definitely need structures that are going to last years and years, because as our results have shown, it takes time for different species to start using them.
Well, that's a perfect, what you just said there, Eleanor, is perfect, because someone is asking right now, what do you think some factors are that could make it take like 3 or 4 or 5 years before an animal uses the rope for the first time? What are some factors you think that might delay their use of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one factor could be how long the road has been there. So whether if it's a new road, perhaps these individuals already know like where suitable crossing pathways are. So if you put a bridge there, they'll start to use them straight away. But if the road has been there for a long time, like some of these roads have been here since the 70s, 80s, that could be a factor. And then also the size of the road, because obviously the longer the bridge, the more bouncy it becomes, which obviously isn't fun if you're a larger species of animal. And then any more possible factors? I think them just getting used to an artificial structure, I think is one of the main things. But then when you start to have a lot of bridges in a region and these species and individuals learn what they are and how to use them, because we've definitely had videos of kinkajou, where the first time this kinkajou used the bridge, he was all over the place, wobbling around, didn't really know what to do. And then he figured out he could put his tail on the second part of the bridge as a support, and then he just ran across. And then every night after that, he knew how to cross and where to cross. So that's something else that we need to think about as well.
Yes, I think probably the artificial structure is not like animals are used to their own paths, their natural paths, but maybe an artificial one would take longer them to like feel confident to use it. So it's not that weird.
Okay, another question here about the recordings. How do those recordings that you're collecting, how do they help in your work?
So yeah, with those camera trap videos, we're able to see which species are using the bridges, and we actually have a camera trap on both sides, so we can actually see which species are making a complete crossing, but then also other species that are kind of investigating the bridge as well, because obviously we want to see over time which species use these bridges and how they move across them as well, because that's all valuable behavior information that we can apply and adapt what we're doing to get better results for conservation.
Yes, for example, we have seen like the double rope, like the animals use one rope to cross and maybe the other rope to attach the tail. So maybe it's a question like some animals need 2 ropes to cross. When we need to decide which design we are going to install next, we're going to think probably a double rope and not a single rope. So it's super useful to see how animals cross, how they use the structure, how confident they feel in any of, like in the different designs. So yes, the videos are like key.
All right. Well, I'm super excited that you were live with us today when you saw the squirrel monkey. So a new species using the bridge. I think that is so awesome. So I'm so glad we got to see that today.
Yes, I was looking to the nothing videos like, oh my God.
We panicked and thought, we're going to have anything.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, there's a squirrel monkey.
You kept us in suspense. You know, there were a few no-goes, but then we got magic. We got gold. So that was pretty sweet. Yeah. So I'd love to know, and I think those tuning in, what brought each of you to conservation? I'd love to hear what brought each of you into conservation.
Awesome. I'll let Carolina start that off.
Okay. Well, I studied in Argentina for like almost 11 years to become a PhD specialized in community ecology. But then I decided that I wanted to apply all my knowledge to a conservation project. I had a lot of experience during my career in volunteering programs in conservation NGOs in Latin America. So I knew that I wanted to do that in my future. So when I finished my PhD, as soon as I finished, I started looking for a job that was like my dream job. And then I found this position and applied to it, and I couldn't believe that I got it. And I'm here like from 1 year now. So
Yeah,
that's
and
my
then
story.
and then I guess for me, I've always known from being a child that I wanted to work with animals. And then it was when I was in university where I learned more and more about conservation and realized I didn't want to just do research or be a vet. I wanted to actually have impact and try and save some of Earth's last wild places. So when I graduated, I came to Costa Rica for a 2-month internship, and that was 6 years ago. So you could say I kind of found the perfect place to contribute to conservation.
All right. It's funny how those short intended visits to Costa Rica turn into much longer stays. It's just truly
Yeah.
like a beautiful and an amazing place. And I mean, the biodiversity, hard to match that.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense. And I think just on a hike in the morning, you can see kind of 5 different animals, and you're surrounded by these giant ancient mega trees. It's hard to leave when you see things like that every day.
Yeah. So I've got another question here. We're obviously, these connections through the trees are great for arboreal animals like the monkeys and other species. Is there anything being looked at for species that are more on the ground? You know, here in Canada, we sometimes have overpasses or even underpasses where animals can go, you know, right under the road and bypass the road entirely.
Yeah, definitely. And so what we've been doing last year is assessing wildlife activity, particularly around the paved highways that we have across the neck of the Osa Peninsula, and then kind of splitting the Osa Peninsula in two. So what we did was install camera traps kind of along the road at different distances from the road. And using that data, we're going to highlight the best spot for a wildlife overpass or underpass for these terrestrial species. So that's something that we're working towards for sure.
But it takes longer. So these structures are very easy to install. We install them in 1 day, but those structures are going to take longer, and legal steps need to be taken. So it's a longer process, but we are working on that too.
Yeah, and it's important to get it right, right? It sounds like you're in the phase right now where you're figuring out what is going to be the most beneficial spot, because the last thing you want to do is put it somewhere where it's just not being used or accessed.
Yeah, so we're looking at wildlife activity and forest connectivity in the area to get the best spot, and then kind of build from there with all the other elements that we'd need to consider as well.
Yeah, and then these bridges that you've been using, how many of them do you have currently right now?
So we have 13 right now, but by the end of the year we'll have around 22.
Okay, very cool. That's a big number.
More and more always.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think one fun question here that we can kind of end up on. Oh, actually, let's squeeze in another one here. So Lily is wondering, where would you suggest somebody looks if they're looking for an exciting job in conservation? Is there somewhere you would point them to look for interesting jobs in conservation, particularly in the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because it's always difficult to get lots of good field experience when you're starting out in conservation. I think we both found that. First place to look would be the Osa Conservation website.
Open, so
come and join us. And then also, I mean, I always follow Ecolog and conservation job boards. Do you have any other places that you look?
I look in one that is called Biodiversity. It's for more like Latin American audience, but it can be an option too. And it's a blog that shows like how to become a conservationist, because when you start, it's very difficult, and it gives you a lot of tips and it gives you a lot of opportunities that are very cool. So for me, it was the blog where I found this position.
Can you repeat the name of that one more time? It was really quiet for us when you said the name.
Biología. Well, I can send it somewhere if it's possible. Because I'm pronouncing in Spanish, I think.
Yeah, if you email it to me, if you have some time, I can add it to the description of the video.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thanks, Joe.
Very cool. Well, I did share the website. I'll put it back up out there on the screen again. If you want to dig a little bit deeper, if you want to learn about the work, opportunities, of course, to help support the work. And I'll put up these here as well. So to Osa Conservation Twitter and on Instagram as well, because that's pretty important. And then, of course, we want people to follow both of you as well. So Carolina, I found your Instagram, so I'll put that up there. If anybody would like to follow along those adventures. And then Eleanor, I found your Twitter and Instagram, so I'll pop those up there for people who might want to follow along and explore.
Yeah, you'll have lots of Arboreal Bridge updates on all of those social media platforms.
Yeah, of course. Well, we have had two great virtual trips to the Osa Peninsula this morning. I'm so excited that we were able to see that live spotting of the squirrel monkey using the bridge. That's really exciting to see another species that's using the bridge. I imagine that's going to be part of your day going forward now, is going through more of those videos to see what you've got.
Yeah, more trees to climb and more videos to watch.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for climbing up that tree for us today, taking a little time to share your passion for conservation and to share the amazing work that Osa Conservation is doing. We love our live events to Osa Conservation.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. It's been great hanging out with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we can't wait for our next student event.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right. We'll see you. Thank you. Okay. Wow. Hard to tear away from that. Even just the background sounds of the insects up there in the tree. So cool. A huge shout out to Eleanor and Carolina for joining us today and hanging out with us in the canopy in such a wildly biodiverse place. And just like the deep ocean, there's tons of discoveries left to be made up in the canopy of our rainforests around the world. Tons of biodiversity we don't get to see because it is such a difficult to access environment. So we're going to change gears here. We have a great speaker coming up. Before we bring Tanya in, I do want to just spend a quick moment here and share another little clip here. So we are able to make this weekend happen with some help from Lenovo EDU. Lenovo is an amazing technology company. They're building an incredible educator community in the US, in the UK, and in Australia as well. If you visit this site here, you'll find the US community. Take a moment to register, sign up, and explore. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher, a student, a parent, anybody interested in kind of science and exploration. This is a spot you want to check out for some great resources. If you're an educator, it's a great spot to collaborate. If you're a parent, so there's some great things to introduce your students to. So do visit that site. Let's play a quick little sizzle reel here, and then we're going to bring Tanya in with us. All right, very cool. So we were just in Costa Rica. Now we're going to head back across the Atlantic Ocean. We're going to head to Italy now. We are going to spend a little time with Tanya Capriati. She is a marine biologist and National Geographic explorer who's dedicating her PhD project to the study of manta rays and their possible interaction with plastic debris. So we just talked to Martina Capriati about an hour ago now and learned a little bit about her microplastic research. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about the megafauna. So during her internship in Mexico, she became passionate about sharks and rays and realized that they are very vulnerable to human pressure, to habitat loss, to ocean pollution. And so after an amazing encounter with oceanic mantas in the Pacific, she decided to continue her studies to focus on the threats they're facing in our very quickly changing ocean. So I'm going to bring Tanya in with us live. Hey, Tanya, how are you?
Hi, Joe. Nice to be here with you tonight. Here.
Tonight for you. Yeah, I think it's just after lunchtime here in Canada. It is so good to see you and to have you joining us. We've had such a great crew following along today as well. We've had people saying hi from the US, from Canada, from places in South America, like Argentina and Brazil, places in Europe closer to you, like Germany, France, and the UK. We are so excited to get to know you a little better, to learn a little bit of your work, and then I bet there'll be a few questions for you.
That's amazing. I'm so excited, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm gonna share my screen so that you will be able to see my presentation. Here we are. Okay. Can you see it?
Looks good. Beautiful.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for connecting with us tonight. And thank you, Joe, of course, for inviting me to this amazing event. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a story tonight, a story of a little girl that was born in a beautiful, amazing place in Italy. As I said, as Joe said, I'm from Italy, and I'm from a very, very beautiful place that is in the northern part of Italy, in the middle of the mountains, and it's called Val Camonica. And this place is surrounded by beautiful mountains and landscape. As you can see in these images, it's full of nature over there. And growing up in this environment, I grew up as, I don't know if in America you know Heidi. So this little girl that is born in the Alps and grows up surrounded by nature. Well, I did the same. So as Heidi, so I grew up in the mountains, and I did what every mountain girl do when she's young. So I went in the forest looking for mushrooms, and I rode horses and played with the wildlife, and it was an amazing young age. But then growing up, I started realizing that what really, really inspired me and what really moved me, it was the ocean. So far from where I was born, so a different environment, but same nature. So I started being involved in marine biology because I started doing diving. So when I started scuba diving, I discovered this amazing new space, because it's totally a new world, from the mountains going into the ocean. And people were always asking me, but how can you go down there with all that water above you? So people from my hometown still cannot realize how I could get to the ocean. But diving in the Indian Ocean, these images are from my very, very first diving course. And I had these beautiful encounters with fish, with turtles, with many, many wildlife. But one was the one that changed completely my life. And this encounter was a snapshot during the second dive of my life. And it was this encounter that is still in my memory, but I have the luck to have also a picture of that, because it was my first picture, underwater picture. And you're gonna see it now. So here is my favorite picture, my favorite underwater picture. Probably you see a blurred image with some fish going around, but actually there is one very special fish here. Probably it's not very clear, And so I want to tell you that this encounter was the one that made me decide to go into marine biology field. So that's when I decided I wanted to be a marine biologist and to spend most of my time underwater or close to the ocean and to do something to help the ocean and ocean creatures. Well, in this picture, there is a shark. There is a whale shark. So it's not that easy to see, but it's a whale shark. So when I saw the whale shark for the first time, I made my choice. And so I enrolled in a marine biology course in Italy, and I studied my master degree in Italy. And then during my master, I decided to travel, to go abroad. And so I traveled all the way to Mexico, on the other side of the planet, in order to study what I always wanted to. So sharks and rays. And so that's why I got to Baja California Sur. And that's an amazing place where I started working with fishermen. So I was doing research with fishing activity. So I was, of course, working with dead animals that came from the fisheries. And we were taking biological samples and measurements and everything. And I did that for my master thesis. But I also had the opportunity to work with live sharks. And so it was so exciting because I was physically handling sharks, helping other projects also. There was a colleague of mine that was working with nursery area of sharks. And so we went out, we fished for these small baby sharks. And we were able to take measurements and take samples and then to release them back in the water in order for them to go around and grow. And I'm going to show you a nice video of this baby shark being released after all the procedures. And so it's very active and beautiful little animal. And I had this opportunity in Mexico to work with sharks, with many species of sharks, many species of rays. And actually, this video is from another whale shark that we encountered in Baja. And as you can see, it had a fishing net wrapped around the body. And so with the help of other colleagues, we were able to finally free it. And I realized how even big animals can get entangled in those fishing gear. And so it was pretty impressive to see a big animal stuck with a net. But during those times, I also had the opportunity to go to a paradise in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's called Revillagigedo Archipelago, and it's made of 4 small islands, volcanic islands, as you can see behind me with the diving gear. There is a volcano. They are uninhabited islands. And so around these islands, there is a lot of wildlife living, and I got to encounter my favorite animal. These are manta rays, and I had the opportunity to go to this archipelago and to meet my favorite animal. And so after that moment, I decided that I wanted to work with manta rays. And so I had the opportunity to help other projects and also to build my own project. And so during this video, I was helping other researchers that were tracking manta rays that swim in the ocean. And this tracker that I put on her back, it's a transmitter. And so with that, the researchers are able to track their movements. So you can see where a manta ray moves in the ocean. And here you can see a video of a beautiful manta approaching me and investigating me. You can see how close it gets and how curious she is. And when I had these encounters in this special place, I realized how big they are. And the most impressive thing is how big their mouth is. So when a manta ray approaches you, you can see how big how a big mouth they have. And that because manta rays feed on zooplankton. There are these small animals that they filter from the water. And in order to filter the water for these animals, they need to filter big volumes of water. Actually, it has been calculated that they filter about 10 bathtubs of water, of seawater per minute. So imagine the amount of water that they need to filter. And so I started thinking, but what's happening with all the plastics that is in the ocean? So if they need to filter all that water to get their food, are they getting in contact with plastics? Are they ingesting plastics? And are they getting some health problem because of that? And so I started my PhD project, and for 4 years, I've been sampling in this beautiful place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And we have been doing trawlings with the manta net. That is this manta in the first picture is a net that collects the upper part of the sea, of the surface of the ocean. And in this way, we are able to collect all the plastics and microplastics that float in the surface of the ocean. And after the collection, of course, we analyze the samples and we are able to establish how much plastics and what types of plastics are in the areas of aggregation of manta rays. And so that was most of the part of my project was about plastics and their relationship with manta rays. But moreover to the collection on the water, we also went on the beach to see how much plastic there is in the areas where manta rays live. And we got surprised because in the middle of the ocean, in these remote islands, we found a lot of plastics. So as you can see here, there is a volcano, there are no towns around, nobody around, but we got to find so much plastics that I really got impressed. And as you can see, this area is really pristine, but plastics reach every corner of our world. And so all these species that inhabit that beautiful area are, of course, threatened by plastics and other human pressures. So during my project, I realized how we are all connected, how all the oceans and all the seas are connected, and how every single piece of plastics that enters in the ocean, no matter where it's coming from, but it will end up in another part of the world without any problem, because it's all connected. And so every action, even if it's in the city, even if you are far from the ocean, every action have a consequence on another part of the world. So this made me thinking a lot about our connection with the ocean, and how also people that live very far from the ocean, even in the Alps, are connected to manta rays in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And so I came back to Italy and to my hometown, and I went in the Mediterranean, and I realized how much plastic we have in the Mediterranean. So when I walked on the beach in Italy, I realized that actually it's way worse than Mexico, where I've been sampling plastics. So I wanted to do something. So I decided to stay in Italy and to do something for this situation, to reduce the plastics in my home country. And so now I work with this beautiful group of people at the ISPRA, that is the Italian Institute for the Protection and Environmental Research. And so we are working in the Mediterranean, in the Italian coast, in order to monitor and propose some guidelines in order to reduce the amount of plastics that there is in the Mediterranean Sea, and especially, of course, in Italian waters. And so I'm very, very lucky, because this event is about women in science. And I must say that I'm surrounded by amazing female scientists. So here are some examples of colleagues that I have in my new adventure here in Italy, but I have had amazing women scientists also in my past life in Mexico. And here are some examples. So these girls are all from Mexico, from a Mexican NGO that is called Pelagios Cacunja. And these girls are rocking science for sharks. So they are conserving sharks and rays in Mexico and doing an amazing job all around the world. And another source of inspiration is, of course, my thesis director, Dr. Lorena Rios. And she has been training me for analyzing microplastics, and she is working in the University of Wisconsin-Superior, doing chemistry investigations on plastics. And of course, my explorers family. So here are some of the most amazing female scientists and that I've got to know during my career. So all these girls in whatever part of the world they are really doing great work in science. And then I wanted just to close with a quote that I listened yesterday to Dr. Sylvia Earle event here with Women Blaze Trails. And she said something that I think is very important, that every girl out there listen, and we should tell it to every girl around the world. And it's that they should do something that you're curious about, to find something that intrigues you, and then just keep following that star. So I think that it doesn't matter where you're from. If you're from the mountains, you can go to the ocean. And if you're from the oceans and you love the mountains, you can go and do science in the mountains, you know? And so it doesn't matter where you come from, what your parents do. You can always have your star that guides you and takes you wherever you want. Because we can all do science, even if we are women, and we can even do it better. So I think that we have all the energy, all the capability, and all the ability to do science, and all girls should know that and follow their dreams. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed to know this story from this little girl from the Alps to the ocean.
All right. Awesome, Tanya. Thanks so much for that story. And I know it may have started in the Alps, but that water flows down to the ocean. So I'm not surprised that you followed it and made your way to the ocean. And what I really like to see was in all the different parts of your career so far, it looks like you've had amazing teams supporting you. And it looks like those teams have all had other women on those teams as well. So, I mean, it's very exciting to see. And I'm sure it's a source of constant inspiration for you, but anybody who sees the teams and the work you're doing as well.
Yeah, exactly. I've been very, very lucky because I've had very, very good examples of women doing passionate work and following their dreams and their career and doing everything they can to follow their dreams, basically, because that's what we all do. Because I had and I've had a dream job, and I worked hard for it. I used a lot my determination. I think that's very important to do, to be determined and to just go ahead. And no matter what happens, you can always find a way.
Yeah. Well, just like Sylvia said last night, you have to stop asking why. The question is, why not? Why not? Why can't we do that? Why can't we pursue that? And I wonder, you mentioned, from your background in the forest, in the Alps, exploring the forest, hunting mushrooms, things like that maybe your family and friends were like, at first, why do you want to go down to the ocean? Have you converted them? Have you shown them how exciting the ocean world is?
Yeah, I always remember something that a person from my village told me one time, and it was, "How can you go in the ocean so deep, so down? If I even get scared when I shower, I get scared of all that water on me. How can you go so deep?" So it's really amazing because you can have a passion from fields that are not around you. You can
Yeah.
always have some connection with a word that you don't even know, but as soon as you get to see it for the first time, you realize your connection and your willingness to follow that path.
Awesome. Well, there's a question here in the chat from Jillian. And she would like to know, what advice would you give to women who might just be starting their marine conservation careers?
Okay, so I think that for ocean conservation, you need to go a lot on field, I think. So every opportunity you have to go in the ocean or to get close to communities that live together with the ocean. And I think that's very, very important, but also to have a lot of self-confidence. So you need to believe in yourself and to follow your thoughts. So a lot of determination, and even if you get some closed doors, doesn't matter. You have to go on and keep on trying and get to where you wanna where you imagine yourself. So if you want to study dolphins, well, search for dolphins, for people that work with dolphins, and just try to get there as soon as possible and start really hands-on and realizing that connection that will make a path in front of you. So in some way you will get where you want. So sometimes it happens, you don't know how, but like the universe makes a path for you in order to get to your dreams. So I think that's a great thing that everyone should do in order for marine conservation, but also for many other fields,
Of course. Yeah, no question. I mean, sometimes I think people talk themselves out of things before they even try, kind of think about the cons without kind of taking those steps. And this morning we started off in Kenya. We met Jessica, an amazing veterinarian working with Osa lions. And her whole advice was, sure, you may jump into something, you may take a chance and it might not work out, but it's far worse than wondering what if, right? Forever.
Yeah.
What if I had taken
Absolutely.
that chance? What if I had taken that risk? So it's always valuable to take those chances, take those risks, and chase after something you're passionate about. So we have another question here. This is from Marique, and they are wondering, what organization for shark and ray research did you work with in Mexico?
Okay, so I worked with this NGO that is called Pelagios Cacunja, and it's based in Baja California Sur in La Paz, and they do amazing job with conservation of sharks and rays, both in Mexico, in the Pacific side of Mexico, but also in the Caribbean, but also they have projects all around the world, because they collaborate a lot with many researchers from Europe, the US, from many places. So they do a lot of work with the conservation, and for example, they work a lot with telemetry. So Pelagios Cacunja has made this very big oceanic marine protected area in Mexico, around the islands that where manta rays live, as the videos that you saw in my presentations. So using telemetry and other techniques, they are able to track sharks and rays, and so in this way, they can give to the government all the science data, all the scientific data that support the creation or expansion, for example, of marine protected area.
All right. So we're going to squeeze in one more question here. This one's from the chat here. We know that some animals can choke on plastic, some can get entangled in fish nets. What threats were you seeing with plastics and mantas?
I lost the last part.
Oh, sorry. What threats were you seeing plastic posing to mantas?
Okay, so the threats of plastics can be both physical, as you mentioned. So they can, as they say, choke animals or reduce their ability to move and, of course, to find food. And for example, for marine mammals, they cannot get to the surface to breathe, for example. But also there are other threats that are less visible, so you cannot see it directly happening. And they are the chemicals, the chemical impact. So this happens, for example, when organisms ingest plastics that is actually covered, let's say, covered with many chemicals. So there are some chemicals in the oceans that are very diluted. So when they find the plastics, these chemicals get attached to the plastics, and in this way, the plastic becomes a vector for these pollutants into the animals. And so when the animal eats this plastic, gets also in contact with all those pollutants that can have very bad consequences in the organisms. So this chemical threat is not so evident, as I said, and it's also harder to link with the plastics. But it has been shown that plastics have high concentrations of these chemicals. So now we are in the part that we are trying to understand if those pollutants are transferred to the animals. And this is happening also with manta rays. So one of the hypotheses is that these plastics are transferring these pollutants to their tissues. And from their tissues, of course, they can have bad consequences on their health. For example, they can, for example, reduce their reproductive rate. They can have a neurotoxic effect. Depending on the pollutants and on the concentration, they can have also very bad consequences on their health. So this is one of the effects. But I think that manta rays' most important threat is the fishing. So in most of the places where manta rays distribute in the oceans protect manta rays, but they protect from direct fishing, but not from, of course, bycatch. So many times manta rays get trapped into fishing line or fishing nets, and they can have really bad effects on manta rays. So you can see sometimes mantas with scars or directly with fishing line because they get trapped basically most of the time with their head in between the lobes, the cephalic lobes. So they can get entangled, and in this way they can even lose some parts of their body, like the cephalic lobes. So those two little horns that they have in the head, they are actually fins that they use to funnel water into their mouth when they are feeding. And if a line gets entrapped in these lobes and they cannot free themselves, they get to be cut. So they cut themselves, and so they miss one part. So I think that's one of the main threats that they are facing. And also, of course, getting entrapped into fishing nets. That's also cause of death sometimes. And so I think these are the main threats that we are posing to them. But of course, there are many others, like fishing, tourist activities. Sometimes they are invasive, and if not properly done, they can damage manta rays, for example, with the propeller of the boats. That's one of the threats that they can face in the ocean, or the disturbance from the tourists swimming, doing activity in the water with manta rays. That's also a problem for them, especially in sensitive aggregation areas, for example, where they mate or where they go for feeding. That can be a problem because they can change their behavior depending on the touristic activities. I don't know if I answered.
Oh, I think so, absolutely. And I think you can clearly see that the challenges mantas are facing are definitely human induced challenges, from the plastics to the fishing entanglements, just to the pressure. I mean, those videos you shared earlier, they're beautiful, charismatic marine life. People want to be in the water and see them, divers, but unfortunately, some people just don't respect their space, and so that puts some pressure on them as well. So, yeah, beautiful animals, but beautiful marine life, definitely under pressure from our activities. So Tanya, I want to just a huge shout out. Let me just share here. If you want to follow Tanya's work, Tanya's adventures, there's her Twitter, there's her Instagram. Please do follow along. It's great work that you're doing. It's taking you some cool places around the world, some amazing marine life, and an amazing journey from the mountains down to the ocean. And it seems to me like that's where you're going to stay. You planted your flag, and the ocean is the spot for you.
I think so. And I'm happy about that.
Of course. All right. Amazing. Well, Tanya, thank you so much. Great to see you as always. Enjoy your weekend. Hopefully you can tune into a few more events, and I look forward to the next time we connect.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you everyone that connected with us tonight.
Awesome.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks, Tanya. Okay, well, we have our next speaker hanging out backstage, so I am not going to waste any time bringing her in to spend a little bit of time with us. We are really lucky to have Ana Valenzuela joining us. She is a Chilean paleobiologist. She's pursuing her PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology at University of California, Santa Cruz. She's a Peter Buck predoctoral fellow at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History, and she's an explorer at the National Geographic Society. Her research interests are in the ecological and evolutionary history of marine mammals, specifically looking at pinnipeds, so the group that includes seals, fur seals, sea lions, and walruses. So how they evolved, maintain that semi-aquatic lifestyle, breeding on land, hunting in the water over the past 30 million or so years. So I'm going to bring her in live with us right now. Hey, Anna, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Oh, of course. It's so great to have you joining us live. Yesterday, we were live with classrooms to celebrate women in and girls in science, the International Day for them. We were live on the beach in California, Ano Nuevo, hanging out with elephant seals, which was really cool. Yeah.
That is so cool. And actually today I'm going to talk a little bit about elephant seals, but very old elephant seals. So we will have, more to say about that.
All right. Very cool. Well, I'm going to let you take over for a little bit, and then we'll have a few questions.
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen there, and hopefully you will be able to see my presentation.
Looks
Great.
good.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. Thank you, Joe, and the organizers for inviting me. I'm super honored to share my research and my passion with you. So today I will talk about my academic journey and my research in marine mammal paleontology. In particular, I will spotlight 2 studies in which I was involved that hopefully will give you an idea of how diverse and fun paleontological research can be. So just a very quick introduction. Joe did a wonderful job telling you about me. Yes, I'm from Chile. I'm a biologist and paleontologist, and I am right now in the US doing my PhD. And I'm really interested on marine mammals, ecology, and evolution. So understanding how marine mammals evolve. And in particular, my research is focused on pinnipeds, this group that includes seals, fur seals, lions. And they are very special because they have this dual lifestyle. So, they forage in water, but they also breathe and nurse on land. So the pinnipeds are very different from other fully aquatic marine mammals like whales, dolphins, or sea cows that spend their whole life at sea. So when I see them, many questions popping into my mind. So for example, how does this species evolve? How did their very peculiar morphology originate? And why are they semi-aquatic and not fully aquatic like dolphins? So, and finally, how climate change will affect them? Because in the ocean, climate change is really making life very, very hard. So I'm really interested to see how climate change will affect them in the future. So to answer all these questions, I use the fossil record. So fossils are the remains or traces of ancient organisms. They are preserved over millions of years in rock, amber, tar, or even ice. And scientists like me who study fossils are called paleontologists. And probably you are familiar with paleontologists working on dinosaurs, but there are other paleontologists that are looking at other animals like marine mammals. And we use a variety of techniques that allow us to reveal, to explore on how these ancient organisms look like, where they live, what they ate, and how they behave. And I tell you, think about paleontologists as like detectives of the past. So we use different clues to reconstruct a whole story of how life was in the past. So my research journey has involved very different components, and one of those is fieldwork. So I have been involved in different and several excavations of fossil marine mammals, but other animals, including dinosaurs too. And here I'm showing you one picture that I will talk more about it about the excavation of some fossil whales in the desert in Chile, in South America. Also, my work involves a lot of work in museum collections in different cities and countries. So when you go to a museum, you see all this wonderful exhibition on display where you can see specimens, objects, artifacts, etc. But behind the scenes, museums also house this wonderful collection where they archive specimens and artifacts or remains of some cultures that provide snapshots of a species or community or cultures at a particular point in time and space. And that information and those objects are super, super important because if they were not in the museum, in those collections, they were lost forever. And those collections are very important for people like me and other scientists because we can study them. So museums have been a key part of my research all over the last few years. So here is another picture of a museum collection that I have been involved with. This is one of the largest collection of marine mammals in the world, and is located at the Smithsonian Museum Support Center in Maryland. This is in the East Coast of the US, and this includes thousands of remains of blue whales and other like baleen whales from all over the planet. And I am there, right there, looking at some whales. But also my work involves ton of lab work. So in particular, I'm interested in looking at the chemistry of these fossil remains. So to try to understand some processes, chemical processes, and how they reveal some aspect of the biology and ecology of these animals through time. And this picture here is real. Those are my samples that I'm right now analyzing for my PhD. Okay, so today I will I will tell you two stories showing the detective work that paleontologists like me conduct. In particular, the first one I mentioned before, I will talk about elephant seals, and then I'm gonna talk about some fossil whales from the desert in Chile. So the first case is this enigmatic elephant seal from Indiana. So this picture that you see here, it was taken in Año Nuevo Reserve, the same place that you explored yesterday, where I'm also a researcher involved with other projects that maybe in another time I will talk to you about. So elephant seals. Elephant seals are wonderful animals. They are the largest living pinniped, and the males can reach over 5 meters long, or that is around 16 feet long. And males are characterized by having this very large proboscis or nose, which can be used to produce very loud sounds, or especially during the breeding season, when mating competition with other males occurs. So there's a lot of activity in the breeding colony. So elephant seals, besides being very large and very spectacular, they are excellent divers, and they spend almost 90% of the time at sea. So right now, there are two species of elephant seals that they look very, very similar, but they are not the same, and I will show you. And you can see here, there are the northern elephant seals. They are located in the North Pacific, and you can see them along all California and Mexico. And then there's the southern elephant seals. They are mostly distributed along the Southern Ocean and in some areas of the South Pacific and South Atlantic. So having in mind what I just showed you, that elephant seals are marine animals that live in the North Pacific and in the Southern Ocean. What if I tell you that we found an elephant seal from the Midwest of the US? That sounds crazy. So that is where we found some remains, very ancient remains of an elephant seal. That sounds crazy. So yes, that is what happened. So as I show you, museum collections store wonderful specimens from very different places in the world that scientists are looking for to study them. So when hidden in one of the shelves of the museum collection at the Smithsonian, there was this specimen. This is a cast or a replica, right, of a skull of an animal that appeared to be like an elephant seal. So its morphology was very remarkable, and I will show you how is that. But it appeared to be something very weird about this, because the papers that were together with the specimen show that this specimen was collected near Lafayette in Indiana. And well, this paper also say that this specimen was found in 1965 near the riverbanks of the Wabash River in Lafayette. So we were very intrigued, because yeah, it looked like an elephant seal skull. So we start describing it. So each part of the skull has a different name. So that is what I'm showing you, the different tiny details. And then we start comparing this specimen. Yeah, it looked like this is a skull of an elephant seal. And this specimen, it will be this section of the skull that is basically the rostrum that preserves the canine, the tooth sockets, some holes for some nerves that go through the brain, etc. So it was, yes, it was like an elephant seal, and that was very, very strange. So we were intrigued, and we continued looking at the morphology because that was the only evidence we had at that moment. So we started looking at different museum collections in different institutions, and finally we were able, just having a big collection of skulls, we were able to conclude that yes, this specimen that was found in Indiana was a southern elephant seal. Indeed, it was a male southern elephant seal that somehow it was able to cross the Pacific, cross the equator, and go to Indiana. So, how did this male elephant, southern elephant seal arrive? So, Indiana, or the area where we found it, it is more than 10,000 kilometers outside its known range. So we were asking ourselves as biologists, is that even possible for an animal to do that? So because of that, we started looking in more detail the biology and the history of living elephant seals to see if this ancient elephant seal was even capable of doing so. So as I said before, elephant seals are excellent ocean navigators and spend most of their time at sea. So in fact, several extraliminal occurrences at very distant locations of the current distribution range that I'm showing you for southern elephant seals in orange have been detected. So each of these little orange points are places where southern elephant seals have been found more recently. And I want you to pay attention to this tiny point here in the Gulf of California, where last year a male southern elephant seal was found alive and apparently very healthy. What is crazy, I mean, this is it was at that time the most distant or more extreme occurrence of a southern elephant seal ever recorded. And then this specimen, scientists were very interested, and they took some pictures, and they found that even this species had barnacles in the hind flipper. That means those are the crustaceans that you can also find in rocks on the beaches, but also in the in wells, because you need a lot of to be a lot of time in the water for have those organisms growing in the body, right? So that means if elephant seal spend a lot of time. So that suggests us that this specimen was capable of traveling very far distance. But we don't have to forget that the elephant seal that we found in Indiana, it's more than 1,000 kilometers from the closest marine source, the ocean. So this will be the most extreme freshwater incursion of an elephant seal ever. So we look at if that will be the case for other marine mammals, and actually, yes, it has been recorded for other cetaceans, especially baleen whales. So apparently, marine mammals don't have extreme limits or strict limits for their physiology or for them to live in some areas. So that was one case, and I very quickly go about a second case that is more related to baleen whales, and this is a case of a fossil whale graveyard in the desert. So in this picture, you can see that there are 3 whales. Here's one skeleton of one whale, there is another, a smaller one, and here is a third one. What is very interesting about this site is that each of those black stars that you see here in the picture are other whales. So here we have 3, 4, 5, 6, and I can tell you they were in this site there were 40 whales. And so this site is located in the desert of Chile, in the northern of Chile, and it has an approximately between 6 to 9 millions of years. So super, super, super old. And all the specimens here, whales and other marine mammals, because I will show you there were other marine mammals too, they have an exceptional preservation. That was very, very unique. So we were a group of international paleontologists, included some students, domestic students like me, that I was finishing my undergrad and then entering into the master program, got together and started studying this site. And we discovered, as we continue excavating the site, that there was not only one level of whales, but 4 different levels. So there was one layer of sediment with whales. There was another. So that means that maybe at least 4 different events occur and accumulate these whales. So what were the reasons? Maybe a catastrophic event, like a tsunami, like a pandemic, or maybe something that we can observe today, that is this Harman algal blooms. Here today is the most common mass strangling agent. So we have 3 different ways to explore this. One was preservation, the other one was sedimentology, and then was the fauna. And I will show you very quickly how we did this investigation. So as I told you, the whales were super well preserved, and that preservation means that the boreal was super rapid, was super quick, and that means that probably a tsunami or another event, like more catastrophic event, was not the reason, because we will expect to find like all the bones disarticulated and etc. But another thing that we found is that there was a preservation of algal mat in the sediment that were analogous of what we see today in lakes when there's massive algal blooms. And also this area has a high iron concentration that is like the food for these algal blooms to grow. And finally, in this site, we did not only find whales, but also aquatic sloths, walrus-like dolphins, other baleen whales, seals, sperm whales, dolphins, etc. So, and this is one of the characteristics of when there is a massive event of toxic algal bloom that affects several different taxa in the ocean. So putting everything together, we were able to say that this was the largest fossil mass strangling site in history. And then the probably cause, it was a toxic algal bloom. And then if you are interested in follow up on this story, please scan this QR code, because that will redirect you to a website at the Smithsonian where you can you can explore all the data that we collected at that site, and also you can access to the 3D models that we created from this site. So basically, those are very scientifically accurate reconstruction of the wells and the whole site, and you can have it in your phone if you want. And if you have a 3D printer, you can print them. And just finally say that science, this is not my only work. I'm not alone doing all of this. Science is super collaborative, and I have been lucky to get together, collaborate and become friends with so many people and fantastic women and other collaborators that have allowed me to pursue my passion. And so the takeaways is that, paleontology and science is super fun and for everyone. Paleontologists can be like detectives of the past. We can use very different approaches, including fieldwork, museum collections, etc. And science is collaborative and is a massive endeavor by many people. And just with that, I want to thank you for your attention, for staying here on Saturday. And yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome, Anna. Thanks for that great presentation.
Of course. Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, that the detective work is so exciting. These mysteries from millions of years ago, and then having to look for different evidence and collaborate with different people to try and solve these mysteries. And those 2 that you shared are 2 pretty pretty big mysteries. I mean, an elephant seal all the way in Indiana, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's jump into some questions here. So I want to start off with, you mentioned at the beginning, elephant seals are deep diving. What are they feeding on when they dive down that deep?
Oh, so that is a very great question. So elephant seals are very spectacular because females can go to the middle of the ocean and they can dive very, very deep and around 1,000 meters deep.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're consuming very tiny fishes. They're called mesopelagic fishes that migrate through the water column. And males are very different because males can dive very deep, but they tend to remain near the coast. So that is why, especially during the winter, you can see them along the coast of California, all over the place, California, but also Oregon and Washington.
Okay, very cool. So when you shared the first story with us, that elephant seal fossil was found in a collection, and those collections, exist at museums all around the world. Do you think there's lots of other mysteries like that, just waiting for the right person to come in and kind of poke through some of those collections?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I can tell you that museum collections are full of wonderful treasures that are waiting for scientists to get into them, to discover them and describe them. I really love museum collections because you feel like it's Christmas time. You open a cabinet and you never know what you will find. Just need to like the correct lenses to discover them.
All right. Very, very cool. Now, when you look at the fossil record, we often see in the past larger species that don't exist today. So giant sloths and others. Were there bigger species of seals like the elephant seal that have gone extinct?
Yes, indeed. There were giant walruses in the past. They are not anymore. I mean, today walruses are big, but I can tell you that in the past there were huge animals. They don't exist anymore. The reason why they got extinct or why they disappeared or they are not anymore with us, we don't know yet. We really don't know, and that is one of the subjects that we want to understand, to trying to predict what maybe that was related to environmental change or some ecological transformations in the marine ecosystem. And that is important because that will inform some of the predictions that we can make about what happens if the marine ecosystem continue changing because of climate change, how that will affect the modern configuration of the pinniped and marine mammal fauna today.
Okay. And so on your latest project, the second mystery, the whale graveyard, you shared kind of that access to those materials. Even looks like you could 3D print some of those fossil models if you wanted to. Why do you think it's so important to give the public access to this kind of science, these kind of resources?
Yeah, because I think it's super important for people to access this because they can really appreciate how research and science work. Sometimes I feel like the scientific discoveries get somehow disconnected from the community, from the global community, and are part of I don't know, like a more secretive communities of scientists. And I think it's important to make it available for everyone. So because different people have different questions, different interests, different tools that they can apply, they can use them to understand these treasures, this fossil record. So I think it's important to make it accessible for everyone, regardless of the language they speak, where they are located, the discipline they are into, etc. Different expertises. So the fossil record is a treasure for everyone and not for some.
Absolutely. And I can just imagine students, kids printing out these, it's more accessible than ever to use 3D printers and to have these in their room as they're thinking about, careers that they'd like in the future, maybe a career in paleontology, becoming a detective, just like you are. So yeah, really cool to be able to bring that science in an accessible way to so many people.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to be alive today with all this technology.
Absolutely. Well, Anna, I want to start off, well, actually here, I want to share a banner here. If people would like to follow along with the work you're doing, follow along some of your stories, there's your Twitter, there's your Instagram handle. So do please follow and keep track of the future adventures. I'm sure there's lots of more detective work to be done. Very exciting. And thank you so much for spending some time with us today, sharing your stories with us. And that really fun storytelling, those detectives, those stories that you have to decipher from these fossils, these imprints left from millions and millions of years ago.
Yeah, no, thank you to you for inviting me. I'm super happy.
Of course.
Yeah.
We'll have a great weekend. Hopefully you can tune into some more events. We have a crazy busy day coming up tomorrow as well. It was great to see you, and I look forward to our next connection.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll see ya. Okay, what a great connection. We got to see a little detective work there. I think now is a great time before we bring in our next speaker to share a really cool video clip that I have here. I mentioned that through Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, we're always trying to bring really exciting live experiences to classrooms across North America and beyond. And it just happened that yesterday we were live on the beach in Ano Nueva, and we had Roxanne and her PhD student, Allison, joining us live. And we were able to show the students some elephant seals on the beach. So they learned about the research, about how they were tagging them, following their dives to learn more. And then the students got to see this as well.
I'm going to be nice and quiet and show you a big guy. And then I'll take you over to a young pup of the year. So if you look really carefully at this pup, you'll see that the pup is marked 28P in bleach. Just taking a little nap. And then I'll take you over to this big group of adult animals here. This is called a harem. So right now there's females, there's pups of various ages. Most of them are about 10 to 20 days old right now. And you can just sort of watch them, I think, while we're answering questions.
All right, so great opportunity for classrooms to get out in the field, explore, ask questions from scientists, from explorers, from conservationists, engineers. So if you haven't visited our site already, take a little time to explore. exploringbytheseat.com. We've got about 45 or so live events for classrooms to join this month. We've kicked all the men out for the month of February, and we're hosting amazing women all month long and beaming them live into classrooms. So let's jump to our next speaker. I'm really excited to have Denise joining us. Denise and I haven't connected for a while, but she has done one of those classroom events in the past. So Denise Spann is joining us. She is a Mexico-based National Geographic explorer, primatologist, and conservation researcher. Her research focuses on understanding how primates cope with natural and human-induced changes to their habitats. So she's particularly interested in how spider monkeys in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula are affected by the expanding tourism industry along the Caribbean coastline. So let's bring her in live with us right now. Hey, Denise,
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. It's so great to see you and so great to have you joining us this weekend.
Thank you. It's been an amazing weekend so far. I'm enjoying it very much, and I'm super glad to be here. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Of course. Amazing. Well, we are excited to add your story to the stories we've had shared thus far. So I'm going to let you take over for a little bit, and then we'll come back in for a little Q&A action.
Sounds great. So hi, everybody. My name is Denise Spann. And there we go. I'm originally from the Netherlands. And if all goes well, you should be seeing my screen, right, Joe?
Looks good.
Good. So yes, I'm from the Netherlands, but I've been living and working in Mexico for the past 8 years. I have always grown up in very many different places. So my Dutch is actually pretty horrendous. I try my best, but I definitely am not as fluent as I'd like to be. But that has also introduced me to many beautiful places throughout my life, and has led me in many ways to where I am now. So I'm very thankful for those experiences. I am a first generation university student, so I'm the first one in my family to have gone to university and to have studied. I studied biology in Leeds in the United Kingdom. And then during that time, I realized that I had a particular interest in primates. And in that course, we didn't really learn particularly much about them, but there was something that captivated me. I wanted to know more about them. So I went on to do a master's degree in primate conservation. And that's where really this whole story starts, about this interest in spider monkeys and their conservation. Spider monkeys are these quite large monkeys that you can find throughout many parts of Latin America. So from Mexico all the way down to Bolivia, in every country in between, you'll find these large-bodied primates jumping through the canopy. They have these special tails that are full of muscles, so they can actually hold on to branches, tree trunks, or anything they need to, and they can completely hang from only their tail. So they can use their hands while eating and have their legs floating in the air. So essentially it works like a harness, like you would use if you're going on a zip line. So imagine having this amazing tail that you can hang on to things. What would you actually use it for? So spider monkeys, females, can actually use it to form bridges. So they do this so that if they have infants that are not necessarily attached to them anymore, so they're not recently born, they're a little bit bigger, but sometimes, the trees have gaps in them, and so they might not be able to jump so far. So the female will actually use her tail and her arms to create a bridge, which the little one can then climb over. Spider monkeys mostly eat fruits, but as you can see here, they can also eat flowers. And in eating these fruits, they play a really, really important role in the ecosystem. So yesterday we heard a lot about the role and the amazing role of arts in science. This is an illustration by one of my students who, in this illustration, clearly demonstrate that when spider monkeys eat fruits, they defecate the seeds, which then pass through their host digestive system. And because they pass through their digestive system, they're actually making these seeds be able to germinate better than if they had fallen directly off of the tree. And so in many ways, these primates, like many other species of primates, help the forest to regenerate. So they're constantly helping to plant, essentially, the forest. And that's why sometimes they've been called the gardeners of the tropical rainforest. So if we conserve spider monkeys and thereby conserve the forest that they live in, we're also automatically helping all the other species that they share homes with. Here we can see some of the species that you find in the Yucatan Peninsula, such as the coatis, raccoons, tapirs, and many other species of animals. So in trying to help and conserve spider monkey habitat, we're indirectly also helping many other species of animals and plants. So I had read all of these things during my master's, trying to find as much information as possible about spider monkeys. But really the real fascination, if I think back, comes from a single image. So this illustration, it's a scientific illustration by Stephen Nash, a very famous primate illustrator, is an illustration that appeared in a list that's called the 25 Most Endangered Species List, Primates in Peril, which is published every 2 years. And on this list, primatologists come together every 2 years and decide which species really need our attention at the moment. At the time of my master's, the brown-headed spider monkey was on that list, and I saw the image and I said, I need to know more about this species. I want to know what is going on with them. I want to know everything about them. There was just something that captured my attention. But it soon became clear that very, very little was known about them. I managed to get in touch with the researchers who were working with this species, and I got some funding to go out to Ecuador and spend 3 months studying this species in the wild. And it was my very first time to go and study any wild species of primate, and also to go to Latin America on my own and to explore the jungles of this amazing set of continents. And that leads to the next image. So this is where the fascination started, and this is where the reality started. So the brown-headed spider monkeys are limited to a very restricted parts of Ecuador. They're not on the Amazon side of Ecuador, but actually on the other side, nearer to the Pacific coastline. But to get to some of the forests where you find these beautiful primates, you have to traverse these muddy hills, which I fell over in many, many times. And here's where really the story starts for me many years ago. And most recently, in January, I managed to go back after many years and see how it all looked more recently. But once you go over those muddy hills, you're met by some of the most incredible tropical forests that you can imagine. These are cloud forests. And so the clouds can come really low at certain times of the day, and it just gives it this kind of mystical, almost eerie feeling when you're walking around there. There's water everywhere. So you're walking through rivers, there's waterfalls. I mean, it's something like from the movies. And at some points I really felt like, wow, where am I? This is just incredible. But to see the brown-headed spider monkeys was not always equally easy. And I think we could go days sometimes without seeing them. But when we caught a snapshot, and this is by far not the best photo, but this is how we often saw them because of all the clouds. There's a really strong contrast of the white sky with the dark color of these primates, which are in completely black, apart from a little bit of brown on the very tops of their heads. So this is a recent video that I took on our most recent trip to see these beautiful primates. And you can see here how they use that tail and have all the rest of their limbs free to move around. And in this case, kind of explore our presence. So what are we doing there? Why are we watching them? So in these 3 months, I learned an incredible amount, not only about the spider monkeys, but the threats they face. I had to learn Spanish, of course. I came knowing what I thought was something, and I quickly learned was basically nothing. And it really set into motion an absolute love for Latin America. It also introduced me to my first 2 female mentors and inspirations. Citlali Morelos Juarez is just an incredible scientist. She taught me everything I knew and know about fieldwork. Such a patient person, and I think it's one of the biggest important things in a mentor is to be patient. And I don't know how many times she showed me, how to use the GPS or simple things in the field, but also shared with me her love, her passion, all her knowledge in the most open and transparent way, which as a young scientist is extremely inspiring to see this willingness to share knowledge and for it to be open and accessible to everyone. And my other big inspiration is Yadira. Yadira, at the time that I was there 9 years ago, was the woman of the house. She would cook for us during the day, and she was a cacao farmer. So she would be all day out in the cacao fields and prepare the meals while we were out in the field with the spider monkeys. Now, 9 years later, coming back, she leads all the operations of what has since been turned into a protected area. She is just the most incredible woman, super strong and knowledgeable and motivated, dedicated. And it really has been a massive inspiration for me to have worked with these women and have seen their journey over the past couple years, and thankfully been able to keep in touch and follow those journeys in a more personal way. This love for spider monkeys then led on to a PhD. I'm very lucky that Filippo Aureli, who is the professor pictured here with me in the field, that he took a chance on me. I wrote him as a young scientist looking for PhD positions, saying, well, I want to study aspects of spider monkey conservation and how habitat loss affects them. But his career up until that point had been on very different topics. And by luck, his response was, for the first time, I'm looking for a conservation student. And I think mentors come in many different forms. So I have had many female mentors, but I have also had male mentors. And he definitely has been one of them. So coming from these very wet, muddy forests, the Yucatan Peninsula is just about the complete opposite. So water in the Yucatan Peninsula is actually found under the ground, which is why you have these huge, huge fig trees that have all these roots sprouting out in the search of this water that's very deep underground. And therefore, you also have seasons of the year where it's very, very dry, and a lot of the leaves actually even fall off of the trees. So for me, it was like, this is a completely new environment, a new experience. I mean, to see spider monkeys like this on trees with, no leaves, tiny buds, where you can see them so easily, was very interesting. And it also led to many new questions about what can we understand about these species, what can we learn from them in this new and completely different environment. So my PhD focused on starting to answer questions that I have been working on for the couple years since then, is how many monkeys are there and where are they? And it soon became clear that, well, in general, we don't have much idea of these questions, but also, how do you actually answer them? How do you go about counting monkeys in a forest? How will I know how many there are? It's not as if I can go up to their house and ask and say, how many people live here? It doesn't work like that. And so what we had to do was we walked for hours and hours and hours through the forest in the hope of seeing these monkeys and catching enough glimpse of them for long enough to be able to see how many there are. Maybe are they males? Are they females? How big are they? So are they adults? Are they infants? And although that works to some extent. Of course, imagine if you spend hours and hours walking through the forest, you're actually only going into really small parts of it, because many areas are so large and so expansive, and we have no idea how many monkeys there are. So this led on to some more recent work that we started on the use of drone technology. And before I go more into that, I wanted to reflect upon this. So I shared some of the results of my research. I was invited to go to the National Geographic headquarters in Washington, D.C. And I mean, as a young scientist, you know, you've read and seen National Geographic all your life. I mean, it's the place of inspiration, ideas, of crazy adventures that one can only dream of. So standing on that stage was a very, very impactful experience. For me, something I never thought could have happened ever. But it's also an environment where ideas are welcome, where crazy ideas are not crazy, they just are to be put to the test. Let's go for it, let's see. And something that really resonated over the years since that experience is this: let's try it, let's go for it, why not, what do we have to lose? Let's see if somebody will support us. And thankfully they did support us again in our research to try something crazy, something new, which was to use drones to try and find spider monkeys. So instead of walking through the forest and trying to see them from downwards up, could we actually see them from up looking down? And we decided to use a special kind of camera, which is called a thermal camera. It's essentially a camera that looks for heat. So it doesn't necessarily take a picture like the one on your phone, but actually it's looking for temperatures. And if the difference in temperature is large enough, the animal that you're looking for might be able to be observed. That was what, up until that point, the science was telling us. So we thought, well, let's see, could this be a way to find spider monkeys and find them quicker than we have been able to in the past? And we can see here that the forest, the tops of the trees are all outlined in purple, and that these three yellowy, orangey, bloody bits, they're actually spider monkeys that are sitting at the very, very tops of the trees, and they're appearing very easily. And so we were able to show that actually, yes, you can use this technology to not only figure out where spider monkeys are, but also start to get more ideas on counting them. So how many could there potentially be? Now, there's still, of course, a huge amount of forest left to cover, and a lot of work to be done, but it's really exciting to see that others are starting to adopt the same methods, the same technology, again, putting it to the test and asking, could this work for us? Can we do this too? Could it work for other species? And collectively, we're all trying to answer these same questions. How many of these monkeys are there? Which is one of the basal questions to be able to understand what can we do to help their conservation. Now, going through all this footage is a very, very time-consuming process. And so we're now recently working with an NGO called Conservation Artificial Intelligence, Conservation AI, and they're using machine learning and artificial intelligence to help us go through these images. And here we can see that this machine learning is actually helping us to detect, yes, this is probably a spider monkey to this degree of certainty. So, for example, 53% means it could be a spider monkey, it could be something else, but at least there is definitely is different from other aspects of the forest canopy, but 95% obviously indicates that it's much, much more likely. So this is something we've been working on very, very recently, and are continuing to develop into the future. But really, none of any of our research would be possible without some absolutely amazing women. So these are the amazing women that have been involved in our field projects for the past couple of years, who day in, day out run after the monkeys in the field and write down what are they doing, where are they going, what are they eating. They have been the ones flying the drones, so some of these women are pilots. They've been involved in answering really critical research and conservation questions. And it's from them that I receive a lot of inspiration, because seeing other women day in, day out be passionate for what they're doing is always a huge driver. And being able to now be in the position to help them drive their careers forward is a beautiful experience for me, and a very humbling one as well. But it's not only people like me that can help spider monkeys conservation. Absolutely everybody can be involved, and I think that's a very, very important aspect. There are so many different ways you can be involved, from simply from your home sharing information about species that you find interesting, so that can be spider monkeys or many others, to when you're on holiday and you see these animals, being mindful of them. So keeping your distance when you watch them, take a photo from a distance, don't interact with them, definitely avoid feeding them. These are really important steps that we can all be actively participating in, to make sure that these beautiful species live on and contribute to the regenerations of their forests for many years to come. And I just want to finish by saying that being a field scientist, or any type of scientist as a woman, comes with very many challenges. And I think some of them are very unique to women. And it's really through empathy from both other female and male colleagues, students, people you work with, people you live with, that we can overcome these challenges together, and find new solutions to them. So, for example, on my very first field trip, as I mentioned, my friend and mentor, Tali, had to help me with quite an awkward situation. Thankfully, though, she didn't make it awkward at all. So I had only been in Ecuador for a couple days. And like I said, my Spanish was limited to, hi, how are you, basically. And for the first time in my life, I had some itching in quite some uncomfortable places. And we had just met. I mean, we knew each other maybe a couple days at the very most. And I had to confess that I really needed to go to the pharmacy. And not only did I need to go to the pharmacy, I had to explain to her what I needed and what problem I was facing, because I couldn't communicate the kind of help that I needed. Thankfully, she didn't make that situation awkward at all, and instead got me the medication. It was all fine. It was all resolved really quickly. But it's through being surrounded by people who help you and support you in times of awkwardness, in difficult times, that we can together overcome even like daily little challenges to really quite a lot bigger ones that women face in scientific fields. And I think we can all help each other. And that's really, for me, a very important message, that empathy, I think, is the way to go forward.
All right. Well, Denise, thank you so much for sharing with us today and taking us into the jungles of Ecuador. it was a while ago when we connected last, and we shared some of your research with the spider monkeys. And I'm wondering, at that time, you were just starting to use the drone technology to look for those heat signatures from above, using AI to try and determine, how likely is that a spider monkey? Is it working? Are you starting to get a clearer picture of the population size?
We're still in the trying phase. So a clearer picture of population sizes, we haven't entirely gotten there yet. Because as the technology moves very quickly, things are also getting easier very quickly. But every time something new advances, we have to see if it will actually work for us. But we're slowly, but surely moving in those directions. And what is really amazing is that others across the range of spider monkeys are adopting this methodology. So we're not only going to get clearer pictures from Mexico, but from many different regions where in some cases we have absolutely really no idea. There are no estimates at all. And so this technology is opening new doors for many conservation managers to start to look into this for the very first time, because other methods just were not working for them. So that's, I think, for now, the really big advance. Is seeing how we can all come together. And a lot of that's overcoming these same obstacles together. It's, has that happened to you guys? Have you encountered that problem? And then, sharing those stories and trying to not all go through the same set of mistakes and hurdles along the way.
Yeah, collaboration is so important in science. It's so important in conservation. Sharing stories, sharing mistakes, sharing good practices. That's absolutely great. You mentioned, in your career when you went into conservation, you took some chances. You reached out to people. You kind of went after what you really wanted. So what advice would you give to a young conservationist, a young scientist who wants to get into field work, who wants to, you came from Europe into a new area. What advice would you give?
I would say reach out. There are a lot of researchers, a lot of organizations that need people, that need help, that may or may not be able to support you through accommodation or funding or salaries with that. But there's many opportunities besides the ones that are like advertised easily online. So if there's a particular area that you're interested in going to, or a species that you heard about, try and find some more information on them. Who is working on that? And then drop them an email. And I think the most important thing is be genuine. Tell who you are. Where are you from? What do you want to do? Why do you want to go there? What is it that sparked your interest? What is it about maybe their research that attracted your attention? And sometimes that might lead to, thank you, but we're not looking for anybody right now, or we don't have space. Come back to us in a couple months. Or sometimes that might be, you know what, I don't have any space at the moment, but you could get in touch with. You come with all kinds of different responses, and at times there's a positive one in there as well. I would say also consider other options. Like look for places that might be a little bit not so well advertised, or that you find out kind of via. But there's many places to go and to learn. Obviously, speaking more languages is a huge plus. So if you want to go somewhere that does not speak your language, I would advise trying at least to learn their language, because it also opens up many more opportunities. Understanding and being able to talk with people, your whole experience and understanding of the place is enriched. And that is, of course, a very active process as well. It's And thankfully now with so many platforms online, that's all the time getting more and more accessible as well, as to be able to learn, practice, maybe talk to somebody on the other side of the world about what they're doing, where they're living, what is their life like in this other place.
All right. Well, Denise, I want to share your handles here, your Twitter and your Instagram, because of course, if anyone would like to follow along, learn more, these are two good places to start. And Denise, it's so great to reconnect. It's so great to hear that the work is continuing. To see, I don't think when we shared your story last that we talked much about the AI. So it was really neat to see the way
this is just from maybe 2 months ago. This is really the newest thing that we've been working on. So that was not even in our minds a couple of years ago that would be possible. So yeah, things really do every time surprise you where they can go.
Awesome. Well, Denise, again, thank you so much for joining us this weekend. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and you can tune in tomorrow as well, because we have a jam-packed day coming up.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Denise. All right. Whoops. I should probably keep myself in the call. That would make things a little bit easier. Let's shift to our next speaker. I'm so excited to have Asher J joining us. Asher is an international adventurer and public figure whose compelling paintings, sculptures, installations, animations, ad campaigns, and films all have a single purpose: to incite global action on behalf of wildlife conservation. So her travels to the front line have made her a witness and storyteller, combating illegal wildlife trafficking, promoting habitat sanctuaries, and illuminating humanitarian emergencies. Her core message, again and again, is that we are losing our biodiversity during the Anthropocene, the age of man. So I'm going to bring Asher in live right now. Asher, how are you doing today? Oh, Asher, I think you're on mute.
Hi.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Second time's a charm. Pleasure.
Second time's a charm. Awesome. Well, Asher, it's so great to see you. It's been a while since we've connected. Every time we connect, you've always got some exciting project on the go, trying something new, approaching conservation in a different way. I'm so excited to catch up and see what you've been up to.
Wonderful. Yeah, a pleasure to be sharing what I'm going to be doing in the coming months and what I've been up to for the last year as well. So just a quick preface for those who don't know my background. I was in fashion designing, branding and marketing. I got into mass media communications for a while there, and started utilizing mass media advertising methods and marketing for the benefit of communicating social agendas as well as environmental concerns of our time that people were oblivious of. And if people don't know, they won't be in an empowered capacity to participate, and they won't know their stake in the problem set as well as in the solutions. And therefore, I try to utilize where there's most amount of foot traffic, where there are most number of eyes, messages that would be easily accessible in a glimpse. And I did that for quite some time, for about 12 years. And then recently decided that, one person doing one campaign at a time can only scale so much impact. There's a level of inefficiency that I think technology can address. And I have thus started a tech startup right now in November 2020. And for the last year, I've been working on creating an application that is on blockchain. I know everyone's throwing that word around, and a lot of people in the environmental space have a lot of negative opinions and perspectives around blockchain, which some of it is informed and some of it is from a state of ignorance, because there are sweeping generalizations being made that I'm happy to counter. And then we are also integrating NFTs and smart contracts in ways that will empower consumers to be more mindful of their dollar spend and to show up from an informed capacity such that they can actually put their money to work in real time while also fulfilling their consumer needs. So nobody's going to stop consuming tomorrow morning. We can't go from having been in a world of having access to material goods coming into our life, services coming into our life as and when we need it, and then suddenly say no to all of it, right? So then there is a need to address how we're doing that? Can we be mindful of it, and therefore look at more positive ways of spending those dollars, such that it's not coming constantly at the cost of non-renewable resources and people, as well as wildlife and wilderness areas. So that's really what fueled my passion, because I've been in the space long enough looking at where the deficits were, and I wanted to find a platform that would allow for both consumers and brands to have a more engaged and empowered position in the world, and they could hold each other accountable as well as maintain transparency in where dollars were going. So that's really what I've been focused on. But I'm going to walk you through sort of the problems and like my journey as to how I got here, and then happy to go into the application towards the end of it. So I'm just going to take you to my screen share of my keynote. Oops, wrong deck. There we go. So yeah, I mean, like this particular thing, I titled it Within Sight, but it's also with insight. And I really think it's about that small shift, you know, when things are seen, you can't unsee them. And then once you've seen them and acquired that insight, that moment of epiphany, it's very hard to turn a blind eye to those realities going forward, because you're already in the know. And when you know, you begin to care, you begin to love, and then you feel compelled to act. And that's really what's goaded my entire journey to relay information in the most intuitive ways that would galvanize an emotional response to what we were experiencing in the world around us, as opposed to taking it in as purely data. Because information, when it's just iterated in the capacity of numbers or words, we can understand it, but we don't really internalize it in a manner that is as second nature as a sensorial input. And that's why I think pictures are more universally accessible. And that's also why I'm using blockchain technology and NFTs, because we do live in a generation where that digital media can be used in truly powerful ways if it's allowed to retain its democratic and decentralized integrity, which allows for peer-to-peer interactions that allow for sharing of information, of understanding in a way that we've never experienced before. So there's a lot of wonder in technology that can link us back to the wonder that is in the tangible world, which I know, again, you know, blockchain and all of this is tethered to the metaverse and people trying to get further disconnected and disengaged with reality. And that's not what at all my positioning, because I am deeply rooted in the realities of the world and really care about the planet, and will do everything in my power to ensure that all of the work that I do contributes back to protecting its inimitable presence and magic. And speaking to which, I started creating a whole bunch of artworks that would condense complex information into two-dimensional graphics. So I started creating layouts that would contrast positive space with negative space and allow people to witness without having to explain it ad nauseum exactly what the core of the concern was. And therefore, if you could truly understand the question, within that question lies the answer. And that's really the design premise and process. It's when you sit with the question long enough, the answer emerges within its construct. And that's why the question has to be framed truly succinctly and in a manner that allows for you to get to the core, the source of what it is that you're trying to address, and not just stay at the symptom level, which we often do in the conservation sphere, as well as in anything to do with, you know, social injustices or everything that we participate in the world as such remains on surface level as opposed to addressing it at the source level. And that's why you keep seeing iterations of the same problem in the world. It's just it's the same retained patterns that are playing out instead of getting them addressed at a core level. So to get to the root of the issue, you know, I think seeing it as an image really does allow you to understand it in a way that's personal to your own known vocabulary, because then it's referencing back to your building blocks, and then you're able to connect the dots for yourself based on your own growth curve and life experiences and exposure to knowledge. So even when a person doesn't share the same value systems or beliefs or ideologies as you, when they see a visual some of those motifs, especially because I tend to defer to silhouettes and iconographic elements that are easy to relate to, because you see them at airports, you see them all over the world. It's kind of inbuilt into our vocabulary in terms of semiotics. And so I try to find ways to integrate those same images or icons into visual layouts that would convey what I think is important to see in order for you to be able to participate as an informed consumer. And it is seeding that conscious mindset. So it's not about explaining, because, you know, you can explain ad nauseum and people just get, you know, bored or jaded or feel like, oh my God, here's another greenie or like a hippie or whatever the terms are, you know, that they want to assign in order to label you and push you away to the side and marginalize what it is that you're trying to communicate, as opposed to truly listen. And to create listening, you need to frame experience, and experience is easier because you're stepping into it and it's immersive, it's inescapable, and you are not given the option to leave. And it's coming to you at a pace and at a cadence that is congruous to your own learning curve, because you're taking it in on your terms, so you don't feel like it's forced and it's not a conclusion, unless of course the image or movie or visual that or communication has been drafted in such a way that the agenda is so explicit that it saturates the person and they no longer want to engage with it. And that happens a lot too. And I think that's a lost cause, because you don't want to saturate anybody's mindscape or heart space with content that has such a strong agenda that it prevents them from framing and understanding and having an epiphany. So I always frame it around the question that I was led to ask, and that allows them to step into the same problem set and then come to a solution that they feel would be the best recourse to pursue. And in terms of experiencing, you know, think about like shapes. Think about when you're looking at a topography, when you're looking at a specific animal and how it looks to you and how it could feel because you've made personal contact with it. In a rescue attempt, you know, when I actually went out and cleaned oil slick birds, I know what that bird felt like. And to express that would be to bring that person into that moment in time, visually, sensorially, versus in a paragraph, which, yes, can be written so eloquently and elegantly that it does truly convey the emotional ethos behind that moment. But I think it's still a step in through a language conduit that could be a barrier to reach the many. And I think when you're looking at visuals, it's easier to bring them into it within even their own language or cultural context. They don't need to understand every aspect of your particular language deficit to be able to get it. Having said that, I have had experiences in the past where I've created campaigns in countries where I have had to think through the fact that they may not have the vocabulary for a certain concept, idea, or even for a way of categorizing something. For instance, in East Africa, when I was running a campaign against the bushmeat trade, we call it bushmeat, we call it, you know, wildlife, we call it livestock. But in Swahili, they didn't have those kinds of differentiations. It's literally just like meat on feet. And so, you know, it didn't matter whether you're culling wildebeest or you're eating livestock, it's still just meat on feet. And so I had to figure out ways to reach them on the terms and within the concepts that were familiar to them. And that's something I would highly encourage, is to always look at where people are at and meet them there. And it's the same thing with my application, the tech that I'm working on right now. I don't want anyone to have to know the tech stack in order to participate. That doesn't empower people. They should be met where they're at. It's about giving them the easiest step into the solution set, as opposed to making it barriers of entry every step of the way. So taking away the concept of crypto from it, taking away the aspect of having to buy into a tertiary wallet, like all these sort of pain points that keep you away from things because it's not familiar to you, is something that I want to take away in my application, so that you actually just enjoy the experience of being a part of a community that is engaged in being change makers, as opposed to being in this landscape of having to know the words, the buzzwords, and the lingo around the technology in order to feel like you're included, right, or accounted for. again, with this other visual that I created last year, this was for FIU. They're going to be using this soon for the Shark Fest. And definitely look at Florida International University. They're doing extraordinary things for conservation around the world, and have extraordinary programs to offer their student body that even outsiders can partake in. So I would highly encourage you guys looking them up. But here's an image of like looking at the acoustic footprint of different biodiversity, and that they're not all expressing in the same frequency. So are we listening? And are we listening to the specific organism so that we receive them on their terms? Or are we listening through our filters and therefore only acknowledging that which we are predisposed to acknowledge? And that's where the anthropocentric bias comes in. And I think it's so important to acknowledge that these biases exist in science, in technology, and that we are creating infrastructure, implements, instrumentation, applications that are skewed by default based on the person who engineered them or brought them into existence, because an application or an instrument or a technology can only be as expansive and inclusive as the individual mindset that gave rise to it. So everything that we're doing in this world, and people like blame the technology, but that's just the tool, that's the conduit. What we should be looking at is the people that are spearheading those conduits. So I always encourage seeing, knowing, caring, loving, and acting. And I think it's impossible to step away from your responsibility and your accountability to self and others. And that's something I wake up to daily. Like, how far is your sphere of impact? You know, is it just going to be within your household? Do you only care about those that live under your roof? Can you take it one step further and look at your backyard? Then you would think about clearing up anything that blows into your backyard. If you were to think a little bit further, you would be responsible for your neighborhood. You would want to go do anything that you can to protect the wildlife that might enter it, the birds that might fly into it. You would look to enrich the immediate context that you take responsibility for. And for me, my responsibility arcs over the entire planet. Like, I cannot wake up and hear about a oil spill in Peru and turn away from it. I am deeply affected by the fact that these realities are unfolding in that which I feel responsible for, and feel the need to act within, and taking that action needs to come from a empowered space, which I didn't have for the longest while because I was deeply emotionally rooted in my responses, and that's very reactive. I would highly recommend everyone check in with themselves and not just get stimulated and entertained by what is unfolding to the point where it becomes dramatic and your responses to it are through jargon that you throw out in a heavy laden way that's doom and gloom narratives on social media. Rather, look at ways to empower the community around being part of the solution, because we so often focus on problems. And I did that for the longest while, right? I was creating campaign upon campaign that focused on the problems, because it's like, if I frame the question and get people into the problem set, they're going to get the solutions for their own sake. But all I wound up doing was constantly framing the problems that people were witnessing. And yes, they got the problem, but then I should have offered the solution in the next visual, which took me a while to get to, because I myself was a cause, selling more causes. So like, that's why I'm so deeply and emotionally identified with causes, because I felt like one myself. And I think it's so important to shift out of that mentality and feel like the solution set, and therefore all you witness and manifest around you is the solutions. Here are some more visuals that I created back in the day that were about the plastics issue, when we were dumping disposable bags and they were all ending up in the oceans, or when we're fishing without any awareness of where the wildlife was coming at or what bycatch it was resulting in, how much we were depleting the world's oceans. Are we truly conscious to read between the lines? Because as a consumer, you go into a Whole Foods market, or you go into any place and you bar scan at the point of checkout, all these living organisms, they were alive literally the day before, and you're taking them home as carcasses. And that is something you need to be holding yourself accountable, because that's your consumption footprint. And being mindful from day one allows you to curtail, even if you don't want to give it up. You can start curtailing just how much you take, how rapaciously you take, and how myopically you do so. Because it's a fact that we all tend to stay within our immediate silo, and it's so easy to get disengaged from your impact in the world around you, because all you're looking at is just today. You're looking at right now. I'm like, I want to eat lunch, I'm going to go get this. But are you really thinking that that choice through to the point of seeing where it came from and all the ripples it results in the world around. Same goes for your end impact. Like when you are putting litter out there, when you're putting things in your trash cans in your household every day, that culminates in the weekly trash pickup, or when you take it to the curbside in New York or anywhere else that you live, you know, I would highly encourage you look at just how much of that truly needs to end up in the landfill. Can you be more conscientious about what you take home to begin with, so you don't end up putting so much of it in the landfill? Because all of it, again, you know, bioaccumulates and biomagnifies through the ecosystems and ends up in the world's oceans and the world, period. And then it comes back to us. Like right now with the Swiss Alps is getting precipitated upon with microplastics, because plastic is now in a hydrological cycle. So are we really paying attention to the fact that we're polluting the very systems that nourish and nurture us and give us the context to do everything that we wake up to do every day, right? Including your professions. And then the other side of it, like I was looking at, you know, sort of carbon acidification, ocean acidification because of carbon emissions, and then looking at the CO2 emissions that was occurring around the world due to our predisposition to a fossil fuel based economy. And what were the ramifications of that? Like literally the quickest way of showing it is sort of hocus pocus in a pot that is cooking the world's oceans away out of negligence, because we're just creating this toxic stew. And the same thing goes for, you know, Sherlock Holmes puffing away at the problem set. Is he actually coming upon the solution, though, that could be affected? And usually he is, but this is just alluding to the moment of that epiphany occurring. And so for me, it's been about like moving away from that into where you see now more of an emergence of a solution set. Like the first iteration of the campaign of evolution was around the fact that we were pumping life with death, and so you can see man evolve into the Grim Reaper. But in the second image, you can see sort of the division between the solution set that's playing tug of war with the problem set of the paradigm that has been. And if you were to go into, you know, wildlife trafficking, another series of campaigns that I created around a constant commodification of the world's finite wild living organisms into something that is just disposed of and used in the most frivolous ways. Oftentimes, it's not even delivering the benefits it claims to be delivering, or it's a matter of vanity. And so for me, to communicate those issues in terms of scale was really important, because we're killing an elephant every 15 minutes. We're killing a rhino every 7 hours. I mean, these numbers might have gone up in recent times. When I created this campaign, that's what it stood for. And I created them to show in a glimpse that the scale of death we were resulting in because we were banking on extinction. I think I meant commoditization, sorry. Sometimes I get into a little clutter when I'm like thinking everything through at once. And here we go with palm oil. You know, once again, when you buy that point of sale lipstick on your way of checkout at Sephora or anywhere else, are you really looking at where they source their materials from? Do you look at their supply chain? Do you really think about what goes in the products that you feel predisposed to purchase? And are we really giving this notion of freedom that we're so proud of to all living beings? Do we extend the right to be, the right to space to be, to all living organisms? And oftentimes we're not. We're infringing on them in order to thrive at the cost of them. And here, like, I moved more towards solution sets and looking at, okay, instead of focusing on the problem, which is the darkness, you know, the doom and gloom narrative of deforestation, palm oil, monoculture, plantations popping up everywhere, can we look at the heart of the ecosystem that is still extant, that is living in, that is coexisting in harmony with indigenous tribes? And can we protect that heart, that beating heart that is still extant? Because what remains is worth protecting. Waking up today to do something to help protect and preserve this for future generations retains the magic that we have in our lives right now. If we walk out our doors, it retains it for the next generation. That is a wealth that is worth inheriting. And that's really what I fight for daily. Looking at also, you know, when all these issues occur together, whether it's been arms trafficking, drug trafficking, human trafficking, wildlife trafficking, women's rights, everything occurs simultaneously. They're all sort of interwoven, interdependent, because the mindsets that result in these paradigms usually are extremely exploitative, and they are very self-centric at the cost of all else. It's sort of like everything justifies the profit margin. And that is a very, very shallow way of thinking. And I feel like right now there's more of the mentality of stakeholder capitalism that we're veering toward. And I really do hope that this is the next generation where conscious consumerism is such an active part of our dialogue daily that we don't, dismiss our stewardship and our responsibility to the world around us, and that means investing back in the next generation and allowing them to inherit these inimitable resources that we have taken for granted in this generation. That's what this one just shows you, is like South Africa saving a whole wealth of rhinos for the next generation to inherit. Because ultimately it's a face-off, right, between the sustainable way of doing things versus the consumptive, profit-driven, myopic way of doing things. And in between those two mind states is nature, just on its own, doing its thing, trying its very best to thrive. And all we need to do is make space for it. The reason there is so much conflict in the world is because there's so much conflict within us, and humanity brings about that which it is. And so we each have a role in shaping the world that we are living in, because it is the way it is because of you, because of me, because of everybody else around us. And if each of us shows up more responsibly right now, the world can shift. You need not continue this butterfly effect of creating consequences that we may not even get to perceive because it's not happening in our own backyard, right? Because it affects and ripples through the entire world, because whether we like to see it or not, the overarching effect is that we live in one planet. It's one biosphere. We're not separate from one another. It doesn't matter where you live in this world. It doesn't matter how far away you live from me. I still have to make choices that are responsible because they might affect you. And that's something that people should be conscious of. And the other idea that I try to focus a lot on is climate change, simply because that is such a pressing reality that we do not have a tangible grasp of, because again, like the butterfly effect, what you do in your immediate backyard may not boomerang within a short enough timeline for our minds to be able to grasp the impact of what we have just done. And so people continue to emit, people continue to consume without realizing that what they're doing here is going to affect ice cover elsewhere. It's going to affect snowfall elsewhere. It's going to result in droughts elsewhere. And we are all interdependent, interconnected. Bringing back to another form of consumerism, what you eat, right? Which I spoke about earlier. This is an illustration of plankton making up a blue whale. Like, living organisms are so mindful. Like blue whales, for instance, poop in upwellings in the ocean so that they can fertilize. They're like the earliest farmers. They fertilize their own plankton blooms so they can consume their food. They grow their own food, essentially. And we don't seem to have the sensitivity to think through cradle to cradle on every one of our processes. We tend to do something and then we forget about the waste impact of it altogether. That's a very poorly designed product, very poorly designed life cycle for that product. And it's a very ineffectual way. It's a very wasteful way, even in terms of energy and resources consumed in creating it, right? Like, it just is waste that we don't reclaim because we don't think waste is treasure. We don't think of it as useful when it actually is. Everything can be repurposed, and that's what nature does. And so I say, like, with pictures, word, like I love this quote that I put here. It says, "I don't trust words, I trust pictures." And it's because words can be so subjective. We can each interpret it in so many different ways, and a picture can be too. But at the end of the day, when you see something, when that feeling that it evokes is so instinctive, it's so immediate, and we all have sort of the same bandwidths of emotional experience in the world through whatever we've been through, that would trigger the same sorts of responses within us, because that's what it means to be human. So I do trust pictures in that capacity. And I would say in the end, like right now, it's really an unfortunate skew, because the people who have the buying power that are resulting in the worst impacts in the world, it's largely in North America and Western Europe. 60% of the private consumption spending comes from here, right? And most of the world lives in poverty. They live in less than $2 a day, and don't have the buying power to result in the kind of consequences that we're causing for all of them. So they're just paying the dues without having enjoyed the benefits, so to speak. And I wouldn't even call what we're doing beneficial, because we're really just being indulgent and easily entertained by poor choices. So I'm really looking at creating infrastructure, which you are more than welcome to look up. It's called Incoperate, INCOPERATE.com. We haven't launched the application just yet. We'll be doing so shortly. But incorporate, because we care how everybody operates once they've incorporated. Like, you come upon brand identity so easily in today's world. Even being on social media as an influencer, you're a brand identity. But like, what matters is what you truly stand for, and what you stand for should be evidenced in how you show up, not in what you say. We spend so much of our time online speaking at one another with very little to show for what those words mean, right? Like, there's no evidence of follow through and follow up on endless exchanges. So much put out there that is just verbiage. So I highly recommend looking at how you can take ownership, how you can be held accountable within your own life, within your own context, but also in the context of the world, and take on as many things as you can, because you're able to. You really are. If I can do it, anyone can, because it happens, just from the shift of perspective from saying it's not my issue to thinking, yes, it is. So take on that responsibility. It will definitely change your life for the better, and countless other lives out there that are depending and waiting for you to wake up. Thank you.
All right. Well, Asher, thank you. Oops, there we go. Asher, thank you so much for sharing that with us today, sharing that message, sharing some of those images. Some of those were new ones that I hadn't seen before, so it was great to see some of the new work. And I look at everything you make, and it just makes such perfect sense for the campaign or the issue that you're trying to spotlight. And I'm always in awe of the way that you think and what you come up with in the end. So what is your process when you're attacking a new campaign, you're attacking a new issue that you want to highlight? Is it a long process, or do you quickly come across those ideas? How do you attack something like global warming, or something like the ivory trade, which I know you've done in the past?
Well, right now I'm working on a campaign with IUCN for the planet as a migratory organism as a whole, right? Like, everything within it is in movement. And it's a really interesting way of looking at, where do we stop the flow of existence? Where do we cessate the capacity to move? Because when we take away the wildlife corridors that allow for organisms to migrate from one habitat area to another, because we have geographically isolated everything by infringing and pilfering into every ecosystem out there, that's something to look at, because then we're not working with the natural state of the planet, which is that the planet is in a constant state of movement. So where are our activities and imprints affecting that flow? And that's really what I'm looking at. So my process right now is to wait for the client, which is IUCN, to send me all of the information on what it is that they want to communicate in bullet points. And then I break it down into words that absolutely need to get conveyed in a glimpse. And then I look at what are the visual motifs that would relate to those concepts or to those words. And then what are the colors or images that they've already utilized in their past communications? Can I be in the same vein of that so it doesn't look dissonant with their brand? And then I look at the through line of what about this whole topic and about their paper affects me the most. And then I condense that into a visual. And usually there'll be like moments of just spontaneous connection with life around me, where I'll see somebody driving and wearing a striped shirt and think, oh my gosh, like that stripe really inspires me with the notion of movement that we think in variegated thought, and then I look at sort of linear movement versus the movement of line in nature, which is more branched. And so my mind just works with lateral association, and that's how I find connections and build a campaign.
All right. So there's definitely that collaboration then between the organization, like something like the IUCN, where you can kind of draw on some of their past campaigns or kind of see the direction that they're going. So there is a little bit of collaboration through the process too.
Absolutely. And then I also look at, people always think like, oh, I'm doing this, but I can't do that. Like I just had a conversation with an investor who was like, I want to get more into visual campaigning and art, but I've been in investment my whole life. How could I do that? And I'm like, why can't you? Because it really is about integrating what experience you've had with what you can bring to the table that will allow for something to get communicated in a manner that is unique to you, right? And so I think people can all be empowered to bring their 2 cents to the table the best they know how, and think about it synergistically. It doesn't matter what line of work you're in right now. Like right now with IUCN campaign, I'm still going to integrate that back into the application I'm working on. So it all comes together if you choose to bring it together, or it can remain segmented and you're like, oh, I'll just make it a tax deduction, or I'll just give back to this one cause at the end of the year. It's not that far removed from daily participation. It's just a matter of, again, taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And thinking holistically.
So the question that I have now is your art progresses, it changes with time, it changes with access to new technology. So, what has led you to start exploring the blockchain NFT space for going forward?
Because I don't think it's being utilized in the way that can affect the most amount of change in the world. And oftentimes I've been told repeatedly that things that I do are literally the most obvious things. In fact, when I've pitched my application, every investor has been like, there has to be something else like this that exists, but it doesn't. So I feel like I end up saying the most obvious thing or doing the most obvious thing, and it's the thing that's most needed. But we all assume that everyone knows that thing, and therefore no one says it or does it. And so it's just taken for granted and leaves this massive market gap that is worth addressing. So I always look at the building blocks, like I say, plot it, which is what is the problem, define the problem set, what language does it need to be communicated in, what are the obvious emotional aspects within it that need to get conveyed, like what is the most obvious thing about that needs to get relayed in order for it to have the most amount of change possible through it being the vehicle. And the last thing would be triggers. Like what are the triggers you can insight or address by putting this particular product or a campaign out into the world? And so I'm like, I always look at what is the most obvious version of it that doesn't exist. And that's literally what I'm creating right now.
All right. Well, I'm excited to see where you take it because, like you said, there's a lot of different opinions about NFTs, about blockchain. A lot of it is ill-informed. People hearing little snippets and not hearing kind of the whole story behind it. So I'm excited to see where you take it.
Yeah, if people follow me on Medium, I am posting articles that will give you sort of a different look at how blockchain, NFTs, and everything can be utilized. And I also encourage everybody to go and create their own things. It's not like you have to follow in my vein of thinking. But if you are interested in what I'm putting out soon, feel free to sign up on incorporate.com as well. And I'm happy to keep tabs with anybody who's interested. So look forward to taking the conversation forward.
All right. Well, throw up some handles there as well, Twitter and Instagram. I'm sure you'll do some posts there that can kind of drive people back to some of those sites as well.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, Asher, thank you so much for connecting today. Where in the world are you today?
So I'm currently in Montana, but I'm moving to LA soon. So we'll be leaving a new lease on life shortly, probably in the next month. So if you guys are in California, hit me up.
All right. Well, Asher, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, taking us into your world. And I can't wait for our next connection.
Yeah, right back at you, Joe. Thank you for having me. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Asher.
Bye.
Okay. Well, we have had just an incredible day today. It's been an absolute blast. We've jumped all over the world today, starting the morning in Kenya, spending time in the rainforest of Costa Rica. We've been in South Africa, the US, Italy, all kinds of different places around the world. And I'm so excited to have our final speaker for the day joining us. Tori Linder has made it her mission to bring attention to the protection of our world's last wild places as a conservationist and media producer. So currently she serves as co-founder and managing director of the Path of the Panther project. This is supported by National Geographic Society. Path of the Panther is inspiring protection of the Florida Wildlife Corridor, a statewide connected network of private and public lands spanning 18 million acres. Let's bring Tori in live with us right now. Hey, Tori, how you doing?
Hi, Joe. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you as always. It's been a while since we've been, well, face-to-face and face-to-face on camera as well. So it is really good to see you. And it's exciting to see what's happening with the Wildlife Corridor project. It's what a massive undertaking, but so important to have that corridor where animals can move through that space.
Yeah, it's great to be here again with you and able to really share some incredible successes that we've had in the last 12 months.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to disappear myself backstage. You can take over for a bit, and then we'll have a little Q&A to wrap things up.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to work on sharing my screen here. Oh, okay. I think Joe is helping me out there. So hello, everyone. As Joe mentioned, my name is Tori Linder, and I am a full-time conservationist. Similar to Asher, I work to advocate for the wildlands and wildlife of our planet. One second, I'm having a little bit of a screen issue here, so I'm going to see. Okay, I think I'm going to move to here. So today I'm going to tell you a bit about my personal journey in conservation.
Sorry, Tori, I just want to jump in. Is it not staying full screen for you?
It was not. I can try to go back if this is a problem. Can I leave it how it is?
Yeah, I mean, if you're okay with it like that, we can still see the pictures nice and big. It's taking up most of the screen. So
okay, perfect. I'm just gonna right here. Let's see if it'll continue to flip full screen. Just let me know if there's a problem, Joe. So to jump back into the presentation, I'm going to tell you a little bit today about who I am as a conservationist and storyteller, and also what we're working to achieve here in Florida. So personally, I started my career working in sub-Saharan Africa. I had the incredible opportunity to work in both Kenya and South Africa with pastoral communities that were facing really incredible challenges on their landscapes due in part to a changing climate, but also other challenges that we address here in Florida, like habitat fragmentation. And it was through this process that I came to really realize the beauty of my own home, my own landscape of Florida. And my family has been in Florida since the mid-1800s. We've been ranching in this state for 5 generations. I had the great fortune of growing up enjoying many of our wild places, like this captivating image from the Everglades headwaters. And I will add, from here on out, the photos shared in this presentation are by my colleague Carlton Ward Jr., who's an incredible National Geographic photographer and conservationist. So my home state of Florida is exceptionally unique. We're a peninsula located on the southeastern tip of the United States with nearly 8,500 miles of shoreline, the highest concentration of freshwater springs in the entire world, iconic wildlife like the Florida black bear and the Florida manatee. And we're also home to the Florida Everglades, a slow-moving river of grass unlike any other in the world. It's for all of these reasons that Florida is so beloved. Today, we are the 3rd most populous state in the country, and we gain nearly 1,000 residents a day. As we work to make room for those new residents, we're also developing at a staggering rate. In some years, we're losing an average of 20 acres an hour to development. This is a photo of a community in Southwest Florida and what was once a healthy and thriving timberland. Habitat loss from exploitation of resources and urbanization is the single largest factor contributing to the loss of biodiversity globally. The consequence of habitat fragmentation is that our protected lands become islands separated by development, which means they can't maintain populations into the future. So in 2010, scientists came together to take a baseline study of current development in Florida, and they projected this in the future if our rates were to continue. And this was the projection. This is our Florida 2070 report, which shows a pretty bleak reality for our state. If you can see, most of these green areas that are protected today become, like I just mentioned, islands separated by development. We have an incredible legacy of conservation in this state. We are nearly 27% protected, and that's thanks in large part to the public lands we have in South Florida. We have 4 million acres of contiguous public lands, conservation efforts that have been led over the last 100 years to protect iconic landscapes like Everglades National Park, like Big Cypress Preserve, or Picayune State Forest. So this was the alternative that was presented. The notion of protecting a wildlife corridor through the center of our state that linked these currently protected lands with remaining opportunity areas to ensure that wide-ranging species like a Florida black bear or a Florida panther had an opportunity to continue thriving into the future. This is an 18 million acre network of lands spanning from Florida Bay in the south to the Georgia and Alabama borders. And today we're looking at about 10 million acres protected and 8 million still requiring some level of conservation status. And so to give you a little bit of context as to why that's so important, I'm sharing here a photo that shows our watersheds in Florida. And so we just highlighted the many benefits of protecting wildlife corridors for wildlife, for critters, for animals, but these corridors are also for people. In protecting the Florida Wildlife Corridor, we're protecting the primary watersheds that ensure we, those of us living in our coastal cities, can continue to thrive for generations. The Greater Everglades ecosystem and watershed, which actually starts just south of Orlando at Walt Disney World and flows all the way south to Florida Bay, provides drinking water for 8 million people. If we pave over the Everglades headwaters, we lose that precious resource. So something incredible happened about 4.5 years ago that proved this science in action and presented a story that potentially had the opportunity to inspire not just our state policymakers, but leaders across the globe as to the importance of landscape connectivity. So this is the Caloosahatchee River, which is located in Southwest Florida on the western side of Lake Okeechobee. As you can see, it doesn't necessarily look like a natural river as one would expect with bends and breaks. That's unfortunately because the Caloosahatchee was a product of the diking and ditching that occurred in the mid-1900s here in Florida as early land developers attempted to drain the Everglades. And that is why today the Greater Everglades ecosystem is touted as the world's largest restoration program. But the reason why I'm showing you this photo of the Caloosahatchee River is because it had been the northernmost boundary for the recovery of our state animal, the Florida panther. And in 2016, the first female panther was found north of the Caloosahatchee River for the first time since the 1970s. This marked an incredible milestone in a truly remarkable recovery story. The Florida panther had reached a historic low of less than 30 individuals in the 1970s. Today, we have somewhere over 200 adult panthers living across the state of Florida, but primarily in Southwest Florida, south of the Caloosahatchee River. And this female panther showed us that by connecting and protecting habitats, these species could continue to move north and make a full recovery with 3 unique populations. So our team went to work telling the story of the Florida panther. Here I am with my colleague Malia Burtis, deep in Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge on a very warm July day. we were wading through the Fakahatchee Strand to service a camera trap system that my colleague Carlton Ward Jr. had set up. And just a little bit of an anecdote to share the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this project. As we were out there, a tropical storm hit, and we spent the next couple of hours dodging falling branches, lightning, and torrential downpour. We had certainly underestimated the scale of the weather report. But the reason why we had to set up camera trap systems to capture the Florida panther was because it's remarkably rare and elusive. It's not like a lion or a cheetah, or in some cases a leopard, where you can simply just send a photographer out into the field, out into the landscape, and capture an image. Pumas are very rarely seen in general, but especially so in the greater Everglades ecosystem, and that's why they've survived here. The Florida panther is the last remnant of the eastern cougar, which used to roam all the way across the United States. And so for the last 4 years, our team's been working diligently to capture never before seen images of this species, but also the challenges its landscape is facing. The leading cause of death currently for the Florida panther is vehicle collision. This is a harsh reality, but we lose on average 20 to 30 panthers a year as they try to cross roads and make it to other protected lands, or in some cases working lands like cattle ranches and citrus groves. And this is a panther that unfortunately had to be taken from the wild because it had started preying on pets in a subdivision directly adjacent to a natural protected area. And this is also a story of hope. This is a male panther crossing under a wildlife crossing on I-75. And just to explain, when we talk about wildlife corridors, we're talking about the protection of connected networks of lands. When we talk about wildlife crossings, we're talking about these underpasses or overpasses that allow wildlife to move around roads without having to be in direct contact with cars. And these work really well due in part typically to a network of fencing that sort of funnels animals to this central connection point. And here you can also see that this is another panther moving under I-75 as a semi moves above. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes these species are moving onto other protected areas, but more often than not, they're actually using the network of existing undeveloped working lands that we have here in the state of Florida. We have a remarkable legacy of agriculture in our state. We're home to America's first cowboys. Floridians have been ranching for nearly 500 years, and the Seminole tribe was known historically as the cow keepers. Today, working cattle ranches on native rangelands, savannas, and prairies are typically managed in a way that allows compatible land use. So this is a bobcat moving from Big Cypress National Preserve onto a private cattle ranch in the Everglades. And it is these lands that our team has been advocating for the protection of from development under specifically a mechanism called a conservation easement, whereby farmers and ranchers get to continue with their way of life and their business, but we ensure into the future that these lands stay green by acquiring their development rights. And that's massively beneficial, not just for our wildlife and our water and all of these ecosystem services, but also for our economy. Agriculture is the second leading driver of Florida's economy. And here we have a photo of a citrus grove in Southwest Florida that has provided vital connectivity for Florida panthers. And so as we wrap up, and I'm trying to keep my remarks short today because I know we're a little bit over time, but we have so much hope here in Florida. Last year, we took the story of the Florida panther and the story of the Florida wildlife corridor, the people who make up this landscape, the farmers, the fishermen, the ranchers, to Tallahassee, our state capital, and we shared this story with policymakers. And the result was pretty incredible. We're thrilled to share that the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act passed the State House and State Senate with bipartisan unanimous support. But we're just at the beginning of this journey. The conservation movement here in Florida truly needs all hands on deck. We had nearly $400 million committed to land conservation in our state next year, and that needs to be repeated again and again and again to ensure that these critical linkages are protected for generations to come. For species like the Florida black bear or the Florida panther, but also for young women like Morgan Yates from the Seminole tribe who can continue honoring her family's culture and tradition. So I know I'm talking to folks all over the world today, and if I could leave you with one parting piece of encouragement, it's really to take a moment to reflect on what you can do in your own backyard. To be honest, I never expected to be back in my home state of Florida working in conservation, but I am so glad that I am. The issues we're facing here are most certainly not unique. And each and every one of us has a role to play in finding the solutions local to us. Okay, so I think I should be rejoined. There we go. Hi, Joe. Okay.
There we go. Hey, Tori.
Hi.
Wow. Thank you for that story. Thank you for those images, the background information. I mean, 1,000 people per day moving to the state. I think you mentioned 20 acres per hour, in some cases disappearing. That is such an overwhelming challenge. I mean, you know, Florida's a big state, but it's still space limited. So, wow, those numbers are just startling. But the work you've been able to do, the light you've been able to shed on the wildlife corridor, the importance of it, the buy-in you've gotten from the community, it's really exciting. So that leads to the first question: communication with the public through images, through video, has been so important to like an important driver of the project. How have you found that's worked to kind of change minds, change hearts, win people over to the project?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point that I think Asher hit on really, really well, that sometimes these concepts are difficult for us to understand due to their size and their scale. And when you boil it down to the story of an individual panther or a population of wildlife, it's easier to understand why this connectivity, why these connections are so important for the future of our communities. That's been, a really fascinating part of this process, to ideate and think about how we boil down these concepts in collaboration with a network of scientists and map makers and landowners across the state. It's also, been a really fascinating part of the journey to allow the people or promote the people who call this landscape home, telling their own story and providing them the opportunity to do that. I think that's where we've seen our greatest successes and wins in this process.
All right. Well, you show that image kind of moving through to check camera traps. And I can remember an event we did in the past with classrooms in Carleton where he was standing in like water up kind of close to his waist, and he was talking about the challenges and such. So is that the most challenging part of your job, making your way through that environment, or is there something else that's even more challenging?
Well, so interestingly enough, just after this call, I have my bag packed and a change of clothes because I'm going to be dashing out to the Everglades to join our foam team and probably be waist deep in water again. You know, I have to say, I think that's actually the best part of the job. Those are the days that make it all worth it, when we get to be deep in the heart of these protected areas and reminded of you know, how incredible and how resilient our natural environment is. There's a rather infamous saying about the Florida Everglades from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who's a famed conservationist and certainly someone I've spent my entire career looking up to, as well as Dr. Sylvia Earle. But Marjorie said, if we can save the Everglades, we can save the world. And I find that quote very interesting because she was not necessarily pointing to the complexities of restoring the ecosystem, right? She was rather pointing to the complexities of dealing with the landscape, the network of partners and private interest and different communities across the landscape. And so, you know, kind of echoing her sentiment, I think at times what I find most challenging, but also most exciting about this work is presenting a vision of a sustainable future and rallying people from really diverse perspectives and walks of life around it.
Yeah, and do you find, you know, you mentioned being in the field and how that's the best part by far. Do you find with this leadership role, you're being pulled more away from the field to other aspects of the project?
Most certainly. I definitely enjoy my field days, but we have an incredible team who is running our field program full time. My colleague Carlton and I are spending a little too much time on Zoom and in partner meetings or directly advocating for these wild places. But by the same token, you know, it's just the next chapter in all of this. And to take a project from inception and production and time in the landscape through to post-production, and then the ability to devote your time to really sharing it with the world and getting it out there, even in a moment as crazy as the pandemic. It's been incredible to see, and I'm excited for future campaigns. And for that matter, I'm excited to launch the Path of the Panther campaign with the public this year and begin sharing the story of the Florida panther really globally. There was an article that came out in National Geographic last year. But we also have a feature documentary coming out in 2022. So stay posted.
All right, very cool. I'm going to share a link here to the website. Of course, you can search it on Google, but there is a little bit.
Actually, just search us at pathofthepanther.com.
Perfect. Okay. We have a question here coming via our chat. So we have a scientist here, maybe Lily, and she's wondering, as a scientist, any advice for starting to move more into communication, more into science communication?
That's a really great question. And I, full disclosure, am not a scientist. I kind of have the privilege of working in that medium space, of working with a lot of scientists and a lot of storytellers and marketing experts and translating concepts and back in between. I think the greatest recommendation I would have is to network and get to know people in the creative space. I spend a lot of time intentionally kind of stepping out of the traditional zone of conservation, so to speak, to talk with creatives, whether it be artists doing incredible work, like Asher, for example, or filmmakers in completely different fields to really get their perspective on how they're telling stories. Also, please reach out to us at pathofthepanther.com. Would love to help connect you to a lot of great organizations who are doing incredible work in that space.
All right, perfect. Well, I think that leads us to one more thing for today before we let you get out into the swamp, out into the field, which I'm sure you're excited to do. I do want to make sure that we share your handles here as well. If anybody does want to follow around on Twitter, on Instagram. And so, you know, a big thing that's come up today is inspiration. So, you know, you mentioned some inspiration from people like Sylvia Earle, who inspired you growing up. So I'm wondering, for future scientists, people thinking about a career in conservation or media, impact media, what advice would you give someone who's looking to kind of get into that conservation world?
You know, that one's pretty simple. I had a former colleague, Peter Seligman, tell me years ago when I first started in conservation to go for it all in and stick with it. I replay that phrase in my head more times than I choose to admit during the week, because this isn't necessarily the easiest industry to be in. But there's never been a greater time, frankly, to be pursuing this work. It is our generation, it is the decades before us that will decide the future of our planet. And we each have a role and a responsibility to ensure it's a sustainable one.
All right. Well, I know that, you know, every day is probably different. There's the good times, there's the good days, the bad days, but it sounds to me like the victories are slowly starting to pile up. 10 million acres protected already, and with 8 million to go. I have no doubt that you and your team, I've had the privilege of hosting a few members of the team in the past, are going to get there. It's great work. Thank you so much for joining us to share it today, and hope you have a great weekend in the field.
Thank you, Jill.
All right. Thanks so much, Tori. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
All right. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of day 2 of the Women Blaze Trails Festival. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. A reminder that at the end of each day, we do take the events and we put them into a playlist. So if you couldn't make everything from the day, you can catch it that evening or maybe the next day. A reminder to spend a little time and visit exploringbytheseat.com. We have an incredible series of events for classrooms this month. We do it every month of the school year, sometimes up to 60 live events. So do explore that website, join in with your kids. If you're an educator, bring it into your classroom with your students. If you're curious, visit our YouTube channel. We have probably over 2,000 videos there now. You can choose to tune into something and dive a little bit deeper into something that interests you. We are going to kickstart first thing tomorrow morning, our final day of the festival. We start at 9 o'clock Eastern, and we're going to go right through to 4 p.m. Eastern. So we look forward to seeing everybody joining us tomorrow. I will end off today by sharing one last link. A shout out again to Lenovo EDU, who helps make this festival a reality, helps make it happen. So there's the website there if you do want to visit. They're an amazing technology company, but they're also building an incredible community of educators, of parents, of scientists, of explorers. So do take a look there. There's communities in the US, there's one in the UK, and one in Australia as well. But this link will take you to the US community. If you are an educator, there's a great group of like-minded educators you can share with, exchange with, ideas and resources and things like that. If you're a parent, it's a great spot to visit to find things for your kids, your students at home. And if you're just curious, in some great resources, like this festival, for instance, we'll be featuring the live events in that community as well. So we will play out today with that Sizzle Reel from Lenovo, and we will see everybody bright and early, 9 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.